Hey, what's up? Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Let There Be Talk. Today is Monday, March 5th, and this episode is brought to you by my fantastic motorcycle sponsor, Elko and Harley. Elko and Harley is located in Southern California in the San Diego area, and they are one fine, badass Harley-Davidson dealer. They just did up my Road King, and I love these guys. They've got all kinds of great things going on right now. They got March in March. Get all kinds of boots right now in March and get $25 off. March 1st through March 31st, the March Madness boot deal going on. Also, they do have the brand new Road King special coming in. You're going to want to go in and check that out. And every April to August, they have bikes, bands, and bikinis on the first Saturday of every month. Free barbecue, all kinds of great things. They have a special going on right now, great offer. They have some zero down financing going on, up to 60-month terms, 0.99% APR. That is under 1%. So hit them up. No excuse not to have a motorcycle. I don't care where you live. Fly into Southern California. They will pick you up at the airport at San Diego, roll over there, get your motorcycle, and ride it home. Follow them on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, or go to their website, elcajonharley.com. Tell Greg I sent you. Let's do it. They are a great sponsor.
Got a foot in the door. God knows what for. And he'll cut me down to size. Still get it to try.
All right, it is a Monday, the 5th here, and I had a great weekend. Hope you guys are all doing good. Saw an incredible show last night over at the, I did comedy last night at the store, and then went over to the Hollywood Improv for my boy Brian Redband's little Secret Death Squad show, which was sold out. And the surprise guest was none other than Mr. Jerry Seinfeld, which was just absolutely incredible. It's amazing, man, just to think, like, when I was younger and Seinfeld was the big TV show back in the simpler days, where there was just a few shows on and they were your shows. Remember, like, I got to get home and watch my show. Well, my show was definitely Seinfeld. And there has been very few shows that have become a phenomenon like Seinfeld and ran that long and stayed that original and good all the way to the end. And it's just everybody involved on that, man, just killing it back then. And I fell in love with Seinfeld, and I would go see him live all over the place. Circle Star Theater. I'd go to Tahoe to see him. I'd go to Vegas to see him. Anywhere the guy would play, I would go and make it a weekend. And it was just amazing to watch this guy. He just would come out, do like an hour and a half, all clean, which at the time I was thinking, oh, that's got to be easy. And now that I do comedy, it's one of the hardest things ever. I'm trying to do 5 minutes clean, and that's crazy hard. Clean is different than, you might think clean, oh yeah, just don't say any swear words. That's not what clean is, unfortunately, or else it would be easy to do a clean 5, but clean comes down to all kinds of things. Premises, can't be crazy edgy, can't talk about this or that, you know, there's all kinds of different rules to clean these days. But I saw Seinfeld walk on stage last night, and it was just still gives me goosebumps to watch a fucking master. And that's a great thing about Netflix. They've signed these guys to do these specials, and now they're all out in the clubs. Chris Rock, Chappelle, Seinfeld, Louis, who, by the way, Louis dropped in on the show I was on last week on Redband's Death Squad. Anyway, they're all out working this material to get it going. and Jerry walked on stage, and he said an amazing thing. He saw Andy Kaufman when he was young, living out in New York, and immediately knew he wanted to do stand-up, which I can't even imagine seeing Kaufman back then. It just so original to see that guy. If you've never watched any Andy Kaufman stuff, it'll never be done again, because as soon as somebody does something like that, you're going, oh, this guy's doing Kaufman. That's how fucking original, and what a stamp he put on a style that no one can really pull off ever again. Anyway, Jerry said he started comedy after that, and 5 years later, he was on the couch next to Johnny Carson on The Tonight Show, which is so monumental. It's funny to think I've been doing comedy 7 years, and I think, man, I'm kind of getting somewhere. I got this podcast going, and 40 people were at my show last week. I can't even imagine. 5 years in, you're doing the biggest show of all time, Johnny Carson, and that's back when I think like 20, 30 million people watched it nightly. Something like, I think 60 or 70 million people, I could be wrong, but watched the very last one. Anyway, the guy is a fucking master. So he was up there last night, and he said, I want to do some jokes from the first 5 years of my stand-up career, which is amazing for two reasons. One, that he if you've ever watched that round table of comics on HBO, he writes everything down and keeps it all. So it's amazing that he even had that material, or maybe he just had it recorded on a special or something and watched it. But and second of all, that I wouldn't even want to do comedy that I did from 5 years ago, let alone 30, 40 years ago. You're going like, yeah, here's some material I did in the 70s. Oh my God. And he did the material last night, and it stood up and was still fucking funny. That's how great of a writer is. And immediately it makes me run home and go, God, I got to get to work, It's amazing to see these guys, Chris Rock, Louis, and Chappelle, and Seinfeld. It's amazing to watch them right now and just go, God damn, these guys are ninjas. Anyway, looking forward to seeing Seinfeld's special on Netflix. It's just going to be so cool to see that guy. I mean, it's just, I think I'm going to be seeing him more and more around town, which is just awesome. Let's get right into the show today, man. An incredible guest. About 2 weeks ago, I got a DM on Instagram, and it was somebody that said, hey, man, do you want me to send you the new Masters of Reality on vinyl? And I was like, wow, absolutely, deep in the hole on Bong Load. And then the person said, maybe you want to interview the owner. And I said, Bong Load? Wait a minute, that's old school Beck, that's old school Elliott Smith. Hell yeah, I want to interview the owner. And then as I look up Wikipedia on the guy, I immediately just go, holy shit, this is going to be an epic guest. And that it was. We talked for over 2.5 hours. This guy is awesome. Tom Rothrock is my guest today. And to say he is a legend would be an understatement. His story alone on how he discovers or sees Beck the first time, it'll make your head fall off. I mean, they recorded Loser together, and the rest is history. He also produced many, many amazing records. Elliott Smith Figure 8, which is one of my favorite records ever. And just an awesome dude. As I was looking at the website, and I'm so pissed I didn't talk to him about this, but he did a Dieselhead record, which, fuck, man, out of sight, out of mind. But Dieselhead Sacramento band, just amazing, this record. And I got to get this from, because I had it on cassette years ago. It was called Elephant Rest Home, and it is a fucking smasher. I need to hit him up on this. Anyway, this guy's done everything. R.L. Burnside, of course, the song on Sopranos. He did the Beck records, Elliott Smith, Wool, Eels, on and on and on. He worked with Motörhead, Poison, Fu Manchu. I mean, dude, this guy is the definition of indie cool. And he came to my house, and what a fucking great guy. So I'm very excited to welcome on. And before I do welcome him on, just a couple things. I've got some shows coming up. First of all, thanks, Chad Pollock, for the amazing donation. What a great guy. And if anybody else wants to donate to the podcast, it's deandelray@yahoo.com. Just email me and I'll tell you how to do it. Or you can go to Patreon and subscribe monthly donation, patreon.com/deandelray. Great gigs this week, March 9th. I'm headlining Irvine, Orange County. Come on out. Let's do some laughing. March 9th, Irvine Improv. March 20th through the 22nd, San Jose Improv with Bill Burr. Those shows are sold out. You want to see me in Ontario? I'm headlining Easter weekend, March 13th through the 16th, Ontario Improv. April 26th through the 30th, my favorite, Denver Comedy Works. And here's a new show for you guys, Minnesota. Yes, a new territory for the Del Raisers. Looking for the 1,000 true fans, June 14th through the 18th, House of Comedy, Minnesota. I love all you guys. I hope to see you this week out there, out and about. Keep the candles lit. Here he is, Tom Rothrock. All right, here we are, another episode of Let There Be Talk. Fantastic guest today. Introduce yourself.
My name is Tom, and sometimes I do stuff with music.
Yeah, Tom Rothrock. What a great name you got. I had Mick Rock on a couple weeks ago, who's the famous photographer.
Not related to Bob.
No. And then Tom Rothrock. Is that your real last name?
You know, there was a certain amount of times that I got asked that in the press, and finally I said, no, I changed it, but I made my whole family change so I wouldn't get called out.
No shit. I love it. At Rothrock, it's like David Lee Roth rock, Rocks.
Tommy Lee, it's funny how sometimes, you get that, you just get lucky. I once was doing a bro deal, like an indie record deal on my little label Bong Load, and the lawyer was just like grinding me, and I was like, my friend had said, he's my friend, he's just gonna do me a favor and he'll just do this for him. I always love to do it for him. Well, this is great. He's grinding me, and I'm like, I'm probably gonna lose money on this project, and I did. And so I finally said, it's funny, Paul, how sometimes your name, like my name's, kind of goes with what you do, and or how you are, and my name's Tom Rothrock, and your name's Paul Dickman. And this was, better part of 20 years ago, and he'll probably be listening to the podcast, and so I just like to apologize now. I was such an ass when I was younger. It's remarkable.
It's insane when this is what I love about Instagram too. Somebody hits me, hey man, would you like to get some of our records? And I look and I say, oh, absolutely, because of Masters of Reality. I'm a huge Chris Goss fan, and he's a good friend of mine. Yeah. And then it hits me. I'm like, wait a minute, Bong Load, man, that's fucking Beck. To me. Here we are. We come out of the 80s, we got 80s rock, and then we got some Jane's Addiction, we got some Nine Inch Nails, and then something starts to happen that I talk about quite a bit, that all kinds of music starts happening. You got Counting Crows, you've got Wallflowers, but then you've got the Horde kind of thing. You've got Lollapalooza with White Zombie, and then you got hip hop hitting. All this stuff is mixing in, and everybody's listening to it all. And then comes this guy who basically is a Dylan fan and a hip-hop fan. He comes on to MTV with this track Loser, and it just blows my fucking mind,
Yeah.
Now, how do you start working with this guy? Because you're at the ground zero of that, right, back then?
Yeah, absolutely. And it was the idea of the label at the very beginning in '92 when it went from concept in my apartment to becoming a reality.
You're living in L.A.?
Living in L.A., right by here. I had at the time I had a roommate with a place on Bluffside, basically Ventura and Vineland, and I was starting a label. The idea had come to me a few years prior in university. It's funny, the beauty of our long format podcast here is I've been, I know from your work and from mine, we're both, you don't know from me, but I now have figured out, we're both capable of going down the rabbit hole on a tangent.
Oh, totally.
And a tirade and a monologue. And
which I love about
I'm
music
already
and life.
I'm already on the precipice here. But nonetheless, on a point that, the long and the short of it is, you and I sit here today because we are fans of music.
Yeah.
And that's what the beauty, that's what I love. I would have never met you possibly if we weren't both fans of music.
Not at all.
And the way that it interweaves and connects and winds never ceases to blow me away. And on top of that, what's just recently come to my attention at the end of last year, a good friend of mine, my sort of kind of key ally and mentor in the music business, his name's Donnie Grace, and he pointed out, and this ties back in, I'm sidebarring huge already, here we go. So this ties back in a conversation you had with my good friend Harper Simon, and this is a conversation that Harper and I had. It's a never-ending, ongoing thing. It's all changed. We sound like salty old dudes. It's not the same anymore. Nobody listens to albums.
Yeah.
And Donnie pointed out a few months ago, he's like, when I was having this sort of conversation with him in Las Vegas in the bar in Caesars, and he says, well, Tom, it's always been a niche. Music, and it really hit me. It's like, oh yeah, even though it saved my life, even though you were waiting for Tapestry to come on Sunday mornings, to restore your family life.
Yeah.
Even though we all have these, it saved my life, it saved your life, but we are still a niche, and it's not. I only realized 30 some years in, a few months ago, thanks to Donnie, that it's not everyone. It's just we are. So that's
what I always say. Like, people go, rock is dead. I go, no,
exactly.
They say that. I go, no, you don't understand. When I was listening to rock as a young guy, there was like 8 of us at the locker. It wasn't the whole fucking school at all. It was like 8 guys. One guy Maiden shirt, other guy Def Leppard High and Dry shirt, other guy Ted Nugent shirt, and you're like,
cool.
And it was never any other guys at all, and it was just small pockets in every town that would fill up the Cow Palace, and
First show I ever went to was summer '84, Judas Priest Defenders Tour, Cow Palace. Oh. And when I growing up in Humboldt, talk about that small town with, and Mike Patton was the counter guy at
Mr. Bungle.
Well, he was and that was our local band that we all, got sick of seeing because they were playing every weekend.
Yeah.
Can you imagine getting sick of seeing Mr. Bungle every weekend?
Unbelievable, right?
Yeah. And so Mike Patton was the counter guy in high school with the Ride the Lightning shirt on every day. He was like Beavis and Butthead mode. Every day, Ride the Lightning shirt behind the counter at the Works in Eureka. So we come from this little tiny niche. Exactly. Those 8 dudes, were dotted around Humboldt County. And when I rolled into that Cow Palace parking lot at 18, with having to take a piss in the bushes because I drank a 6-pack and got stuck on the Golden Gate Bridge coming from Santa Rosa on the last leg of our journey. When I walked into that parking lot and started filing in to when it was, $13.50 I paid for the ticket, including fees.
Yeah.
And I saw all those people, and I was like, once again, the niche became larger. That was when I started to think, wait a minute, it must be everyone. There's thousands. Look at all these metalheads. I can't believe it.
It's unbelievable, right? And really, it's how you start bonding with people pre-internet and email and all that. It'd be like, dude, man, good to meet you. A guy be from like San Jose or San Bruno. And you go, yeah, man, we're going to Motley Crue next week at the Warfield. Yeah, I'll see you there, man. And then you see these guys, and then you start seeing them at clubs, and it becomes like your crew, and it becomes a giant crew. And these are the same people I talk to fucking from then to right now, How about that Defenders of the Tour, man? They open with Love Bites.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable. Down. When you feel safe, when you feel warm, you're like, oh my God. Priest It's funny. I was just watching the Screaming for Vengeance tour. I watch it like twice a year on YouTube. They had it on MTV Live in Houston, I think it is. That fucking band from Point of Entry.
Yep.
Of course, people are going to say, British Steel. But I'm saying when I saw them, Point of Entry, Screaming for Vengeance, and Defenders, it's unbelievable how molten they are.
Yeah.
It's a punch in the fucking face. I just watched US Festival again. I was there at the US Festival.
83.
Yeah. And you cannot believe how great these guys are. It's like, it's all real.
Broad daylight in the sun.
Broad daylight, leather, special outfits,
Sweating.
because it's like, Rob's like, I'll go vest since it's 118 degrees out. But he's killing it on like Victim of Changes and shit. And it really blows
Totally
me away.
uniting the crowd.
Unbelievable, man. Unbelievable. That guy and their tunes and still, I'm really floored there's no footage of the Point Entry tour, man. It was probably
Right.
It was probably one of the best tours I've ever seen. They come up from the boxes. There's some really shitty footage. You can barely see it. But I went down a rabbit hole of reading about that whole tour. There's a site dedicated to that tour only.
What?
Yeah, and it's just the way they break it down like solar. They open with Solar Angels, and it's got the helicopter thing at the top, and they play it for an extra 7 minutes for the climactic theme of them coming out of the boxes, which Kiss did also on the Dynasty tour. Boxes, underground,
Okay, Dynasty and Point of Entry. So who was first?
Kiss 79. So that's
yeah. No,
but but the Point Entry tour looked cooler. It was this like yellow wall with lights that came up. They had a round light above that came down like a helicopter. And then they come out. There's Rob leathered up with the denim. That's denim and leather, looking more kind of like
the transitional
That's
period.
the great look. Yeah, transitional. Instead of full leather, it's leather jacket with Levi vest over it, which later became like the Metallica fucking, that was the look, leather jacket, Levi vest over.
And probably their highest point of entry, their highest concept art album cover. I mean, what did that mean? That perforated matrix printer.
That was badass, right?
Going forever into the horizon and the desert. Yeah, really.
So you grow up there in Eureka, huh?
An arcade on the other side of the bay.
I know it.
Humble
The
State.
green triangle, the emerald triangle.
The heart of.
Yeah, back then, man, it was really weird when you think about weed. I recently got stoned again, and I was so fucking stoned, dude. But I think about weed in this terms of like 70s. I don't know how old you are. I'm 51, but 70s. It's just this kind of shitty weed, Colombian or Thai stick with the seeds. It's
Acapulco
popping.
Gold with all the seeds in it.
Yeah, and you're smoking. It's like pop. Remember they pop.
Totally. Like popcorn shooting out of the joint.
And then these guys start growing this weed in Humboldt called Cola Buds. And it's indica. And
that was my childhood. Yeah, exactly.
Me too. And people are like, and the buds would be like as big as your arm. And they would hang over, right? And you'd smoke it and you go, whoa, this is some next level. Now the weed is
forget about it.
Beyond. I can't even fucking, man, I thought I was dying. Actually. But remember that? It was just like, and then everybody started growing in Humboldt. It's funny, they say, if the growers went away, that town would have been gone years ago. The whole thing would have been out because of the lumber.
At the same time, and fishing restrictions came in as well, and lumber restrictions. And so in high school, one day a kid shows up. I don't remember which one, but I just remember the T-shirt. It was just like, it was so classic. All Humboldt counties, fishing and logging has gone to pot.
Wow.
And you had proper hippie-hating redneck dudes that were laid off that were growing pot. It was pretty damn cool.
Yeah, it was almost like Ted Nugent type people.
Exactly.
Total anti-stoners, but, all of a sudden they're growing weed.
And the nudes with the buzz cut. And a pickup truck with something redneck stuck to the bumper. And he was growing weed and supporting his family. It was like, whatever, like the TV show way before.
Weeds. Yeah.
Weeds. No, actually, I was thinking of the meth one.
So you're growing up there, and what gets you into music? You're just up there, and it's a small town.
Perfect. So here we come full back to where I just sidebarred off at the top. Exactly. So I go to I happened to travel a lot when I was a kid.
Why is that?
My parents were both teachers, and my father was a professor, and he became department chair of the theater department in Humboldt, which within the state system was one of the best theater programs. And for being in the middle of nowhere, this stick little place, it was an amazing, in the 60s and 70s, the film and theater program, which is the same department, were amazing there. And so I grew up in the theater, and it was funny when you were talking about getting your mother back on Sundays when Carole King Tapestry would come on. You know, like it was like, okay, we're coming back. You know, I never, growing up in the theater, it was we'd have crazy parties at the house, like rap parties of productions or a Halloween party, off the charts, like crazy nutty stuff. I mean, picture these parties from my earliest memories, from like, you know, really the golden era, from like 69 to 76. Imagine what those parties must have been like, completely nuts. But I never got my father back. He slowed down a bit when I moved to LA at 21 to pursue recording bands, making music, and but then he got sick and died just as I was getting my first like major label productions out there.
Wow.
And he just burned it fast and lasted to 59. And so yeah, that's the environment that I was growing up in Humboldt. And so when all my friends were going away to school, we had already lived a year in New Zealand. I was born in England. I'd been back in England when I was 12 and 13, which is a huge musical impact moment on me. Being in dropping into London. Imagine dropping into London as a 13-year-old kid in the summer of 78. So
the Clash?
Everything is on 10, and they all know it. Now, we're still rocking Saturday Night Fever and everything related.
Yeah.
Casey and the Sunshine Band, all of the airwaves here. So the mass media here is all still disco phenomenon. You drop in there, and they're like, well, do you like the Sex Pistols or the Clash? I was like, I didn't know either.
Yeah.
I had no idea. I wasn't living in New York. It was completely off, and it didn't exist in California, Northern California at that time. And it was unbelievably. So huge shaping year there. So as my childhood goes on. When I got to high school, my parents were like, maybe we should stop traveling so much. Every third or fourth year, we'd spend a year somewhere else. And so in high school, I went to high school in Arcata right through. And afterwards, I didn't really have a plan other than I didn't want to go to work. I wanted to go to university or something, or college. And my SATs were shit. I showed up hungover, and I guess really I had test anxiety, and so I just couldn't face it. So I got loaded at a keg party the night before, and never retook it. I took it way early so I could take it again. Never retook it. So I finally just went to Humboldt State. My father said, hey, you know, enrollment's down, and they got some backdoor thing. They'll let you in on probation even though you didn't finish geometry or whatever, and your SATs are crap. You'll have to pay a premium for a couple quarters, and you got to get like B+ beyond average. And I was like, yeah. So I just rocked it and got in legit, and through the back door, and there I was. And I was in '86. I started working at the end of '85, '86. I was working at KHSU, the little college station up there, which had a huge signal, 10,000 watts in the middle of nowhere.
Wow.
And it was a beautiful freeform station, and it really got good from like midnight to 6 a.m. every night. And I miraculously, my best friend John Hawkins and I both got air shifts next door to each other. So I'd come on at the end of his show, and he'd stay into mine. We'd overlap, and so we had this 4-hour block, 2 hours each.
So you guys were DJing?
We were DJing on the station, and you had to do something to volunteer in the station to keep your shift. So I volunteered in the music department. This amazing music director named Paul, who was completely just nuts. And that's how I started to learn about the labels and the infrastructure from the other side of the fence. It was immensely helpful when I moved to LA. And so we would get these records every day of the week, and we'd go in there and volunteer, and we'd sign the records in. And this is where the weaving starts happening, unbeknownst to me. If you could, this is why we don't, it's why we're not all psychic. It's why we're not all alive of past lives, if there is such a thing, because we would drive ourselves nuts if we knew.
Yeah.
And so I'm sitting there checking in records, and one day a record comes in, and it's a band called Vomit Launch on Ratbox Records out of Chico, California, which was the rival university. And I'm like, well, fuck. If some joker in Chico, our rival school, that's why I'm thinking joker, can start a label called Ratbox and put out a band on vinyl, then I'm going to start my own label one day. And that was it. That was the seed.
Wow. So
6 years later, I said, it's time. And that's how Bong Load started. That guy, here comes the weave. Then I go to do an interview for Tape Op magazine years later on the back end of an Elliott Smith production, because the owner of Tape Op, Larry Crane, and Elliott Smith are good friends in Portland. And so, boom. So I say, hey, Larry, I got a story to tell you. He's like, how'd you start Bong Load, dude? I was like, let me tell you the story. I start telling him the story. Guess the fuck what?
He's that guy.
He's that guy. Oh, my band Vomit Launch. Oh, my label Ratbox Records.
Wow.
And he's still rocking it today.
That's unbelievable.
Right? The weird.
Yeah. Now, when you want to start a label, Is it because that you love bands that aren't signed and you're like, fuck, these bands should be signed?
They deserve, yeah. That was for me. That was it. Like the whole model was from the get-go, and goes back to where you said, how'd you get into Beck? Was, you know what, I'm going to go find stuff, because I was already having meetings at that point. My recording buddy Rob and I were having meetings at majors and trying to get a leg up as major label record producers, but coming from the street. And so I could already see and know it was pretty obvious what the majors would and wouldn't sign. We were all seeing the output all the time as music fans.
Yeah.
And so I knew there was great stuff out there, and I was firmly entrenched in like the SST, Southern California punk rock culture and whatnot. You knew that you could exist outside the system as well, but what interested me, when I was a kid back in Humboldt, there was once, going back to that theater and film department, it was around 77. They were doing the Humboldt Film Festival. There couldn't be a smaller film festival in the world, but my father had been in the Army with a director named Sidney Pollack, and he's like, fuck it, I'm going to call up Sidney, send him a message, send him a letter, whatever he did back then, and ask him to come up and speak, and he did. And so they show a film, I think it's 3 Days of the Condor, and they talk about it, and some punk student goes up, to try to knock him off of his perch and says, well, hey man, look, you make all these films and stuff, but you're working with big stars. You just did Bobby Deerfield with Al Pacino and stuff, and you're really part of the system now. You've been indoctrinated. You're not. What about the art and this and that? And, yeah. He's like, I'll show you. Says this film student, and Sidney Pollack just looks at him in his New York sort of way and says, yeah, look, I'm a film director. So what if I have an amazing career? What am I going to make? 12, 13 films?
Yeah.
It's like, look, I want to make films that people see.
Yeah.
And I'm like this little 11, 12-year-old kid, and I'm like, note to self.
Yeah,
Make
right.
art that people will see.
Well, it's so true because,
Hence my idea of finding stuff the majors didn't want and then interfacing with the majors.
It always comes down to that stupid punk rock thing of people go, oh, they sold out. And it's like, it really blows my mind when people fucking say that. It makes me angry because, like, look, I'm living in this apartment right here. You know what I mean? In LA, I've been striving all my life to do something. You work for free for millions of years, and then you finally can stop living like, in your car or, eating Burger King every day, and then all of a sudden you're a sellout. It's like most people wouldn't even keep going. You know what I mean? You wouldn't even have these bands. They'd be like, this is way too tough. I'm fucking out, So to call people sellouts, it'd be like if I said, hey, well, why don't you just work at your construction job the entire life for free? They'd be like, fuck you. You know what I mean? But since it's like, music or whatever.
And then you get paid, and you become a mid-level guy. A
mid-level.
Everybody's going to tell you you're a sellout on the site. No, I don't think so.
I know, right? Like, hey, that guy's a journeyman now. What a sellout. You should be back with the laborers picking up lumber, It's such a fucking easy cop-out thing to say, And it's also when these bands are playing, not once are they sitting around, the ones that really kept going, are they sitting around going, man, when we get rich and famous, it's just what they do. You know what I mean? I mean, if you look at a guy like Elliott Smith, he changed fucking a lot of people's lives, but he never was doing it to get rich. You know what I mean?
Well, there's two kinds of people in the world, and that goes back to me just finally having this epiphany in Caesars with Donnie a few months ago. It's like, there's people that love music and are passionate about it, and we are the minority. And then within the people that create music, there are obviously those who are the same. They make it because they grew up with it and they love it and they're passionate about it. There's some people, and it's not a judgment in the least, of course, that really don't care about music. If something's playing in the Gap when they're shopping, like maybe that's fine or whatever, or they go to a show. You can see you can get the vibe of it with some people in an EDM event. If you go to it now, to look at the contemporary landscape of what US Festival is now, it's like Electric Daisy Carnival, and it's populated with a lot of people that are there to be there, not because they're following some music like life and death, some DJ or artist. And that's fine. It's totally fine. Of course, it all makes the world go round. But they're those sort of people, and they're there as fans, but also an eye opener too is that they're there within making music. There's people that are passionate, and it accounts for a lot of the pop. Once you understand it, accounts for a lot of the pop landscape. Elliott Smith not part of the pop landscape, ironically on the Oscars at that moment, but and that was always my goal. I didn't have anything to do other than helping make the music with Elliott getting on the Oscars, but that was always the idea: take the real stuff and somehow subvert the mainstream. And that's what happened with the Loser video. And that's the goal. Why can't there be good stuff in there? And there can be. And a little bit of music made by the people who live and die by it, as opposed to those who see it as a device.
Yeah.
As a
I
means
believe
to
in
an
that
end.
now. I believe now it's bigger than ever. Like
Yeah,
there's
absolutely.
people keep telling me there's no good music, and I'm like, you're out of your mind. I can't
There's
even
too much good
I can't
music.
even keep up with it, right? There's so much that I forget. Like people go, hey man, you ought to check this band out. I go, oh, all right, I'll check it out. And then I go, fuck, I was rocking these guys a year ago, but it's just so much builds up. Like right now, I'm rocking all them witches, and I go, all right, I'm just gonna engulf myself in these guys because I don't want to, skip over. It's so good.
And it's not just us oldsters. We always talk about the landscape changing and the death of the long form. And Harper Simon and I had many conversations when we were making, especially his second record. I mixed his first, and lots of conversations about this. And we're really feeling it. And I'm really happy to now have lived long enough past these last few years, past that, to see that, the long form and accepting that it is all a niche. The long form is alive and well. And it's like, why now when we're doing vinyl issues on Bong Load, they go nuts. And so the current generation, people that from high school to college, university to the early 30s, those people are gobbling up vinyl, and it is and it's again a show of status. What's in your stack, and a lot of them, especially the college age. Some of my friends' kids that are in college now, they can only afford or have the space to deal with a small collection. So once again, like when you only had a little bit of money to buy music, they're really careful about what they buy, because when their friend comes over and flips their stack before they go out that night, it's who they are. It says who they are.
Let's see what you're about. That's how it was whenever I was at a keg party.
I
go over to the vinyl and go, oh, this guy's got Double Live Gonzo. All right.
My kind of guy.
Yeah, immediately, like you start looking through it. It's so funny, man, how vinyl is shot back now. It's just absolutely, and I've said it to you when you walked in. I just love it because it takes the ADD out of listening. Yeah. I've committed. There it is, Candio by the Cars. I put it on side one, then I get up, I put on side two, and then I put it away, and I go, that's exactly how they wanted you to hear it. That sequence,
the side split.
Exactly.
Conscious.
All that, man. The cover art. Look at that thing. That Vargas on the cover, So you move to LA. You're going to start a label, and you start going out looking for bands. Are you just getting demo tapes? Or are you going to live shows around Hollywood? What are you doing?
Well, at that point, in my spare time, I was working at a little office suite studio upstairs in the record plant called the Micro Plant. Unrelated, just a cute name play. A guy named Steve Deutsch owned it and operated it. He's still in the business. Amazing guy. One of those early supporters. Anyone that supports you at any point in time, is immediately like in heroic, iconic status forever in your mind and DNA. And Steve was an early days one. He had this little studio, and I saw that he had major producers like Don Was coming up and doing MIDI keyboards and stuff. The furthest from my interest in recording.
Just kind of overdubs in there?
Overdubs or top to bottom MIDI stuff, like R&B stuff, hip-hop, which was a new art form at the time.
What year are we talking?
Mainstream. We're talking 88, end of 88.
Oh, yeah,
89.
so hip-hop.
Delicious Vinyl, Tone Loc,
about to
Young
hit with
MC,
the West Coast.
It had just dropped the bomb.
Right.
Delicious Vinyl had just happened out of an apartment just down the street in Hollywood Boulevard. And that was another thing, like it's time to do a label myself, and that's why I kept telling I went and got a couple people that I worked with at Record Plant. I started at Record Plant before I moved up to Micro Plant. I was like the lowest guy on the totem pole, and I took a couple of their peers, Rob Schnaff and Brad Lambert, when I started Bong Load, said, hey guys, help me out with this. I was already recording with Rob and together, and then and Brad wanted to start a label with some other guys at A&M Records A&M Studios, a couple other working stiff. They were going to start a label. I was like, no, come over to our team. And I've already got stuff in the can. And that's why that was the final impetus to start the label at that point. I'd seen the examples. I'd seen Vomit Lunch in college come across my desk. I'd seen the Delicious Vinyl guys go from an apartment on Hollywood Boulevard to being clients at the Record Plant, and I had to go get them lunch. I went out during the making of Paul's Boutique, as I was a runner. And this is how quickly I went from a runner to a label owner. It was that short of a period of time between Beck and Paul's Boutique. Right. I one day got the assignment about 4 p.m. to run up to a record shop and buy Number of the Beast, and it got sampled. And there's some little BIP of Impulse Boutique of Number of the
Wow.
Beast. And I went and bought that one at Tower on Sunset. So
Wow.
nostalgic
So you bring
moment.
it back to them so they can sample something on there?
Yeah, and I'm thinking, in my mind, I'm like, these guys are my peers, and I'm their runner, and
Yeah.
their clients. We're going to change this very quickly.
That's the Dust Brothers doing that, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Who later
and it's important to differentiate there only for the rest of the world, no, but us people that really like music, it's important to differentiate that, when the press and the media rolls through town and the carnival comes and leaves, what is often referred to as a blanket statement of the Dust Brothers also involves Matt Dyke, and who's not a Dust Brother, and he was and Mike Ross, who is the owner of Delicious Vinyl, and the two Dust Brothers. So there's 4 people,
Right.
but a lot of times the work of those 4 people is referred to as the Dust Brothers, and it's not all the work of the Dust Brothers. And that's not to take anything away from John King and the other Dust Brother, but it's just to point out that those other 2 guys never get mentioned.
Right.
And,
So there's 4 guys in
so
the
it's
Dust Brothers.
Mike Simpson and Mike Ross. Let me be sure I get these names right. Maybe I'm not, but we can anybody can Google them up. Google up Delicious Vinyl and look at the at the wiki. I'm sure it explains all this. Yeah, there's Mike Simpson and John King are the Dust Brothers, and then there's Mike Ross and Matt Dyke, and the 4 of them are the sort of amazing gringo, warhead of West Coast hip hop. The idea of kind of, in a sense, gentrifying it, really making it accessible,
Right.
And dealing with the business and dealing with the art. They're really at the forefront of it. And So, and my point also is, at different times, all 4 of those were in the studio doing Paul's Boutique. Matt Dyke was down there a lot.
It's interesting to think too that like Beastie Boys go with basically these unknown dudes, because
Yeah.
we're talking about they had the License to Ill record, which sold a gazillion, 100 million records. They're the biggest band at the time, or hip hop,
Yeah.
and then them and Run DMC,
Yeah.
and then they slip in and go to do a second record. And they're working with these dudes you never even fucking heard of. They could have easily worked with any of the biggest producers on the planet, and
Yeah.
they stash away and do this record that pretty much bombs when it comes out amongst the mainstream. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like the label's like, what is this? Where's the we got a right to fight the party and all that shit, And then it grabs basically it completely makes it next level in the art form. You're like,
Yeah.
holy shit. The album cover, the songs, the videos. Hey ladies, they're living in Silver Lake. They're wearing the old man's clothes that were hanging in the house. Everything about them, they start, their own clothing line and store and everything. It's just like next level,
Yeah, they absolutely did it right. Somewhere around then, there's a story I read in the press where they're recounting on the tail end of the first record and showing up cold to some party at some event in Beverly Hills and wanting to walk in and hit it and getting turned away and turning to each other and going, boys, we better write some more hits or this isn't gonna. But what they did is they did and this is where not only they're obviously really all the things you just mentioned, the clothing store, Grand Royal, across the street from us, funny enough, in Atwater on Glendale Boulevard, across the street from Bong Load, was their label at that point. In the studio where they made the third record and they started playing instruments, and that's all right there in Atwater, and we were across the street from each other. We used to have a diorama set up with a couple army men and stuff and cardboard boxes representing the buildings on Glendale Boulevard, and it showed us surrounding them. It was like our strategic little map of how we were going to do in Grand Royal. And they got wind of it and got kind of wound up about everything. So got a lot of rumors. So we had friends that worked over there, so there's always people going back and forth across the street. And Mark Cates, who A&R'd, didn't sign but repped, worked with Beck at Geffen, was at that point then the head of Grand Royal across the street. And it was good times, good scene. But so it goes.
I went to one of the Dust Brothers house about 5 years ago. He was selling it in my neighborhood.
No way.
And it was fucking insane.
Great
it was
taste.
basically where Beck did a lot of his recording. So what he bought was this old Spanish mansion.
Yep.
And then he built an ultra modern house next to it, almost like Ferris Bueller's Day Off kind of house,
Right.
where you could drive the cars into the bottom floor living room, and then the next floor was like 5 bedrooms for his kids, and then it was total state of the art, ultra modern, and then the other
Nice.
Spanish old 30s mansion was there, and it was the studio.
Where they had the studio,
It
yeah.
was unbelievable. It was the ultimate compound I've ever seen.
Those guys, impeccable. I mean, they really drove their career off of their record collection. And speaking of people that love music, and their width and depth, especially for their years, was amazing. I mean, they had records way beyond stuff that I knew about, and completely. One has a tip of their hat, completely mind blowing. And their taste carried right through to real estate and everything in life. They were definitely up for, and not just the finer things, but the really sort of eccentric, esoteric, bitchin' fine things.
Yeah, you could tell by what this guy was all about. I mean, first of all, the open house was like this private thing. They had like wine and cheese, and then you could look at his records. They were all in there. The studio, the gear was all set up. He had a half pipe there, on
Yeah.
the side for his kids. And it was just like, I go, why are you leaving this? And he said, the kids are getting bigger now. We just got to get out of here. It's just like, it was kind of the modern house was kind of funky setup. It was, But man, I was like, it was like a compound. You went up this long driveway, and then
Wow.
you couldn't even tell where you were. You're in
Yeah.
the Hollywood Hills, but it felt like you're in the forest.
Nice.
God, man, it's so great. So you're starting the label, and how do you come up with Beck?
Yeah, so that summer of '92, I met a friend, and again, the intertwining. Another guy that worked at Record Plant, his name's Dave Bassett, and he has a band called Lost Luggage, and they have a little tiny band house, this duplex in Silver Lake near Hyperion. And
And this is Silver Lake when no one's living out there. It's just ghetto.
yeah, just my friends and in danger.
Yeah,
And,
totally.
proper.
Absolutely, man. Silver Lake was so different 20 years ago.
I don't recognize it now. I want to roll in.
Oh, God, it's crazy now, right?
It's beautiful, but it had an edge then, of course, and so the brave were out there. So my friend's band lives out there. Dave Bassett and his band, they all live in this thing, little like in bunk beds in this little one-room place, 4 dudes. It's proper, like, exactly what you were talking about earlier. Like, why would anybody would do this for free forever? And the intertwining, on and on it goes. So this is summer '92. Now I'll go to the summer of last summer, 2016. However many years later that is. Dave Bassett has co-written the 2 largest spinning airplanes, hits in America, and so
Wow.
and so yeah, it's so cool to see how it goes. So he's having this barbecue back in the summer of '92, and another friend of mine is this guy John Newman, huge an artist and huge music fan. He ended up working for years at Sony in the he would proof copy in the reissue department a lot. They get these like box sets and stuff, and he's so meticulous. He'd know all this stuff, and knew everything about music and esoteric stuff. He turned me on to a lot of stuff back then in the late '80s, early '90s. John Newman, and so we're at this barbecue, and we're all there at Bassett's house, and John Newman's there, and he keeps telling me he's just like dog on a bone. He's like, I've been working with the Actors Gang, Tom, and it's really got a band together, and it's a rap party this weekend. And I'm thinking back to, of course, I'm getting flashes of my theater childhood, and between growing up in Humboldt with the Grateful Dead everywhere.
Yeah.
Like it's kind of like pushes a nerve, like have an actor's after rap party for a production. This barbecue's amazing. It's summertime. Everybody's here that I know. He's like, we got to go down. There's this place. There's this little tiny coffee shop down in Pico. I was like, oh, great idea. The sun's going down.
Huh.
Called Jabberjaw, and they're going to be playing there tonight. It's going to be great. And he's like, can we? And they're like, okay, John. And we're barbecuing away, and he keeps like asking me, and I'm thinking, no way, I'm going to stay here.
Yeah.
And eventually, he's such a sweetheart of a guy, and an awesome dude, and good friend. And finally, I'm like, okay, can I go down there with him? And there's a band called Dick Tit playing, a guy in a tutu, and I'm like, I can get down with whatever. Okay, this is cool. And but I'm always shows back at the barbecue, and they get done, and now the Actors Gang band is going to come on, and I don't know if Jack Black was in or not. It could have been, but it was that era when it was all going on, the Actors Gang. And so in between, this guy jumps on the stage as Dick Tit is clearing off their gear, and the next band's starting to set up, and I'm standing in the far back corner. It's a sweat set in Jabberjaw, and a far back corner of the thing, and this guy comes up and wrangles a mic up to his mouth, and the second vocal mic. He pulls out his acoustic guitar, and he's got a rope for a strap. It's like a total Woody Guthrie thing.
Yeah.
Lead belly, and he's got a rope for a strap and something written on his guitar, like in charcoal or something, and everything's fucked up. And he's got a harmonic on a brace, and so he's got a Guthrie, Dylan, Lead belly all in one. And he starts playing this song called "The Cut in Half Blues," and this weird folky kid seems like a little bit younger than me, and the chorus comes along of "The Cut in Half Blues," and he says, "The last thing I saw was the big long saw. I got the cut in half blues." And I'm like, fuck me. Yeah. This guy's like, man, that's like when you start rhyming the same fucking word with the same fucking word, that's like Aussie level shit. That's like witches at black masses. You know what I mean? Like, I'm like, wait a second. Yeah. Generals got it in their masses, just like witches at black masses. Like, that's so, like, I'm like, oh, who the fuck is this? And how the hell is he younger than me and knows about Lead Belly and Woody Guthrie? And
at that time too.
Yeah, exactly. Like that time period you were just describing.
That shit. And
I'm like, how can this possibly happen? The only reason I knew Woody Guthrie and Lead Belly was because at dinner time, when it was my father's pick for the music, on the rare occasion of a family dinner, those were always his picks. And he part of our family on the Rothrock side grew up in Okema, and my great aunt Ina was a neighbor of Woody Guthrie and the Guthries. Yeah, and so every time in the summer when we take a trek back to Arkansas, where the Rothrocks come from, when we'd stop in Oklahoma at great aunt Ina's, my father at dinner would wait for his moment, and every year he'd try to slip in that. Every year we'd drive back. It was like fucking Vacation, the movie. And anyway, we get to that point, and we get to Okema, and he says, so Ina, what was it like with the Guthries, the annual question? And she'd say, "Oh, Dickie, I told you last year, the Guthries was just white trash." She never got a story out of it.
Hilarious. Yeah.
So here I am in Jabberjaw, and Beck knows these things. Like, how can he know this? So it's like, once again, music ingrained in your DNA from childhood. And so John Newman's talking to me about how the Actors Gang band's coming up next, and but it's like, it's like Charlie Brown, wah, wah, wah. I'm like a tunnel vision watching the sky, and the band starts to play after, and he goes out back, and he's still wearing the guitar. He doesn't have a case or anything. He's out in the patio behind Jabberjaw with the guitar on. And
it's like the one he played in the video.
It is, yeah, exactly like that. And so I say, hey, I liked your set. You seem like you probably write a lot of songs. Like, oh yeah, right. I have like 3 or 4 today. I forget them all the time because I don't have any way to document them. I was like, oh, I got like a DAT player. We can document them at my place sometimes. You just want to do like a Library of Congress thing. I said, but I've got a really good friend, Carl Stevenson, and a while back we thought about doing a hip hop folk thing, and we never really got it going. But watching your tunes today, I think we could really do something with a hip hop folk. He's like, well, what do you mean? I said, do you like rap at all? He's like, oh yeah, I really like Chuck D and Public Enemy. I was like, okay, great, because we can put some beats together and then make a hybrid with your folk thing. And but we tried it once before, and the artist had flipped out and run out of the room going, "You're ruining my songs." And the year before, and so this time I was like, well, let's preempt this thing. Like, I don't want to flip this guy out when we get to the studio. And I said, but we might really kind of change things with what you're starting with. It might not be at all the same with what you bring in. Of course, if it's funny to think of describing this to Beck now, because of course it'd be right up his alley. But I have no idea. I've just seen him play, and he's a real authentic folky,
Yeah.
And so I said, we're going to distort things, flip them around, turn them backwards. And he kind of went blank for a second, and then got this big grin and said, "Oh, you mean you can fuck things up?" I was like, "Oh yes." And so I called Carl up and said, "Hey, I think I found the guy to do the hip hop folk thing." And he's like, "What?" He'd forgotten. He's like, "What are you talking about?" I was like, "No, remember that?" "Oh, okay, sure." He was an easygoing guy, and he just called me last week. I haven't talked to him in a year. It's amazing. And so I said, "Yeah, Carl, let's do it." And I set a date, and I go and get Beck, and we go down there. And he's living in this mansion, this guy, Happy Walters, a manager.
Now, where's he living at the time? In Larchmont or whatever?
Beck's living on the east side, and he'd call it a garage, but it was kind of like I think it was a 2-level thing. It was in an alley. It was a garage in an alley, but slightly converted into a living space.
He's just in there, just in like...
I mean, he was living on food stamps or unemployment or both, and... he really had nothing. He had a car that a girl had given him, sort of a sympathy thing. It seemed like a really nice girl had given him this car, but it would, it'd break down all the time. And wonderful guy, but no evidence of financial stability or fortitude. He was certainly
was he a
not
strange dude at that time? Because when you see him, you're just like, of course he picks up that whole slacker phrase. Everybody's like this new slacker rock. And
that was the big lesson there, because there's about an 18-month period from when we went to Carl's house that day and created Loser in the first 6.5 hours from scratch out of the air, and the three of us, and there's about a year and a half between that point where you started to see it on MTV, from creation to that. And in that time period, the song floated around, and we had a cassette of it. We'd play in meetings at record labels and stuff, and then we finally pressed up the 12-inch single on vinyl on Bong Load, and then it picked up steam, and it kind of became the first, or it did become the first song to reach mainstream FM radio outside of a major label.
Yeah,
it really
was it the first number one indie?
I don't know on which Billboard chart it achieved what, but certainly on Commercial Alternative it was top 30, and it had not been achieved by an independent label. The system was locked up by the majors and by design.
And also like a lot of like kind of payola stuff where you couldn't get anything on the air.
Yeah.
So how were you guys getting it on the air? It was just undeniable.
It's a long. We could do a whole podcast on that series of events, but it basically came down to, and this is a story I've told to artists many a time, because it's really easy, whether you're on an indie or a major, the only time you don't bitch about the label is when it's your own,
Yeah.
And it's really easy to complain about the record label, but the reality is, and it's in all aspects of entertainment or art or anything, when you got people making stuff out of thin air and trying to express something to the world, somebody else is going to come along and say, this is brilliant. And they will stake their reputation, their livelihood, their career on it. And you might not ever meet them or know about it. And that happened a bit with Loser. The short version of it is we're circulating this 12-inch single after playing the cassette for people. And we're about 18 months in. And we play it at Geffen in an A&R meeting for Tony Berg, who's a first-time early A&R guy, record producer. Ironically, in the weaving, the first record producer I ever met, I ended up at his house when I landed in LA in '87. So boom, full circle, Tony Berg. He wants to sign Beck. He's a little too gung-ho. It doesn't work out. Beck ends up at Geffen, and that's how Mark Cates inherited the project. And so he loves it. He has astutely employed the morning show guy at KCRW as a scout for him.
Oh yeah,
Chris Doritas. And so
Chris, I love him.
Yeah. So he sends a 12-inch over to Chris, and Chris starts dropping. It's already on KXLU. Fred's already got it. The demo listen guy, Fred at KXLU, amazing, super supportive guy as well. Fred Kiko. He's already playing it. And I'm just so stoked because KXLU is my favorite signal in LA. Behind KCRW, going back to my lo-fi college punk rock roots. And I can't believe we're hearing a Bong Load record on radio.
And this is the first release?
Every day, yeah.
First release?
Yeah, no, this is pressing number 5. We did and we've had the random spin on KXLU. The very first thing we did was a band from Humboldt, from my hometown. My dear friend Martin Brandley had a band called Grimace, and we made a CD. I made it for him. I had a studio right by here in Van Nuys, and in a 1940s dentist office, like about 600-foot studio. It's just a total dive, 350 square foot studio actually, and we recorded a whole album in this little tiny old deco dentist office. And I said, "Yeah, I'll record you for a week." And he's like, "Yeah, I don't have any money." I was like, "My car just blew up." He's like, "I'll trade you my old Blazer for a week of studio time." Done. So I did a week of studio time, sent him away with his masters, and he couldn't find a home for it. And then I started Bong Load. I said, "Hey, you still got those 10 songs?" Like, "Yeah, okay." Well, I started a label, and then we split the cost of pressing it, and then Bong Load was off, and we had our first thing. So we did that. We did 2 7-inch singles, a band called Further, which is amazing. You can still see people on Instagram trading around for the Further 7-inch. We did Grimace, a cassette EP with Muzza Chunka, a band that we were developing ourselves.
Mother Chunk?
Muzza Chunka.
Oh.
And roughly translated Native American for Iron Road. And Muzza Chunka, Grimace, Muzza Chunka, and then we did 2 7-inches. Further, which is an amazing band, which became Beachwood Sparks. Speaking of LA,
Beachwood Sparks, great band.
So the precursor was Bong Load number 3 was Further. Was the 2 guys from there went and made Beachwood Sparks, and then the Bong Load 4 was all this stuff. it's amazing how it all just keeps going intertwining. And Bong Load 4 was a band called Wool, which is the the break apart of the DC band Scream. Their bass player goes missing in LA on tour. And so Dave Grohl goes and joins Nirvana for the recording in Sound City of Nevermind. And the two brothers are left there in L.A. at their sister's house in North Hollywood going, what are we going to do? Let's start a band. It's Wool. We got wind of this and saw them play, and we're like, holy crap, we've got a label. We'll record you for free if we can put it out as a 7-inch. And so there we were. And then at the same time, we've done Loser, and it ended up being the 5th. It was recorded at the very beginning, but became release number 5 as all this other stuff was going on.
Wow.
And Loser, Tony gives it Chris Doritas, so now it's gone from KXLU to KCRW, and now it's getting a buzz. Everything's rolling along, and the jump from public radio to commercial radio, where this single becomes historic, is a guy named Marco at the End in Seattle, and he's become a music director, upgraded to music director, and the MD's become the PD, the program director. And so he keeps hearing through his intelligentsia in LA about this song called Loser, and it's and we're selling tons of them out of the back of Brad Lambert's Camaro. He's taking a box every couple days to Aaron's Records, and Moby Disc and whatnot, and he's just like selling, and like out of the first 500 copies are just selling like hotcakes. And Marco keeps saying, like, hey, I can't find it. His buddy down here, he's saying, I can't find it up here in Seattle in any of the stores. And the guy's like, fuck it. So this is some dude, I don't know who he is, bless his soul, treks from the west side across to Aaron's, buys a copy of Loser, puts it in the post, and mails it to this music director in Seattle at the End, which had just recently gone commercial alternative. That's why they changed the staff around. They just switched to the commercial alternative active rock format, or whatever they're calling it at that moment. And but they're reporting to the commercial alternative chart. And Seattle's a significant market. It's not like, some small town. And so
it's a great market, especially at that time. They're starting to, you've got...
Seattle's blown up. So
it's blown up.
It not only is it a significant market, regardless of the grunge movement, it's a significant market, period. And it's the center of the hottest spot in America for music. So he goes out on a limb and he says, I'm going to play this on the, not too big of a limb, but he's like, he gets it. He loves it too. It meets his friend. He never heard the song. It's only his friend's description because he can't find it.
Yeah.
This is pre-internet. So he gets the 12-inch single, and they're like, crap, we don't even have turntables anymore. He carts it up. He transfers it onto an analog cassette, like an 8-track, and he drops it in on their, whatever their Smash or Trash, Live at 9 at 9, or whatever their thing was, their weekly, like, dial in and check the phones.
Yeah.
It's a standard radio thing back in the day when they were independently programmed like that. And so he starts playing it, and the phones go freaking crazy for it.
Wow.
And so the weekly music meeting comes around, and the program director says to him, Marco, hey, what's new? What's going on? What's moving? And he's like, I got this song, and I met with him like a year after all this, and in person, and he told me the story verbatim. And he's like, yeah. So he says, there's this new kid out of LA called Beck, and I've been playing his Loser at the nighttime thing, and the phones are going freaking crazy. I've never seen phones like this. I'm thinking I might. He's just like downplaying it. I'm thinking I might, test it. Main time. I think I might drop it in the morning a little bit just to see. I think we should just move it. Let's just give it a little try. And because, like I said, I've never seen phones like this. And he says, I deliberately didn't tell him it was on an indie because he would have. The reason why Beyond the Pale, the reason why the stations didn't want to play the indie records is because if they make a move on a record like this guy was about to do, it's career risking. He was downplaying it and playing it cool because he's risking his career, and that's how he pays his rent, is by being a music director.
Yeah.
And what happens is, if you go out, even in a small market, if you go out on a record, especially the first guy in the country, if you're as a commercial programmer, music director, if you go out on a record and it doesn't then circulate around the rest of the country, you have egg on your face, and you're jeopardizing your career. And so that's why they would stick and be conservative to the mainstream stuff, and the payola didn't hurt. So he can't say it's on an indie because the reason they feared indies is because they didn't think they had the wherewithal to deliver. But unbeknownst to him and everyone else in the world, Bong Load was a very major label friendly record, and that if there was something big we wanted to then interface it with a major. So he goes out on a limb, and the record goes freaking nuclear. And so they just move it up into their A-list rotation. So here you have this indie record, an A-list rotation, and all of a sudden they're realizing it's back, like it's the hearkening again of the golden era of radio when it was freeform. They're like, holy crap, we're the coolest station in the country because this is going off the charts and nobody else can get it.
Yeah,
it's a regional hit. It hadn't happened like
Can't
since
even buy it in the stores or anything. You got to buy it out of a Camaro.
Exactly. So it just went bonkers, and he became a hero. So instead of losing his job, he became like a legend.
Wow. Now, once it fucking hits, how are you guys getting calls like, we'll take like 10,000 of those?
Yeah, like, no. Well, yeah, the retailers want them, but we're getting ready to repress another 500. But in that first 500, it becomes its initial charting. You know, it becomes it was completely serviced by Bong Load, a major indie record plugger called Del James. I gotta make sure I get these names right because I haven't told these stories in a long time. There's a record plugger who contacts us and says, hey, I'll help you fill in the blanks. We've got half the country cooking on this record. And they all had to contact us somehow. They're like asking people. They get our P.O. box. They get our phone number out of information. They're calling us up. And Bradshaw's working this thing out of his apartment and in the edge of Beverly Hills. And these records, these radio stations would call up, and he would service them the 12-inch vinyl. And one just begged us, we don't have any turntables left. We can't, you know. And we went over to my house and we transferred it onto a DAT tape because they had that off the 12-inch, and that went on like it was a station in Minneapolis. So weird. It's like it's cooking. We got about half the country covered, and this radio plugger looking to make a notch in his gun comes up and says, I'll work the rest of the country for you for free. And he just nailed the rest of the P1s, which are the top markets and whatnot, and just filled in the blanks. Wow. And so this completely happened outside the system, and he became a hero for doing that. And yeah, it was amazing.
This is insane. Now you when you go in and track with Beck, do you only do the one song, Loser?
Yeah, that's all we did initially. But right away, we knew that it worked. You know, we were doing a session in this guy, Happy Walters. Carl was staying with his manager at the time, Happy Walters, and you know, it was label put out the first Korn stuff and whatnot. He was a dude. He was super young as well. We were all like peers, and we go into Happy's mansion. He's got these two amazing, super beautiful, like college age women who just seem to be living at the place. They just kind of float in and out like pigs, like fairies, and so we're. But at that point, you know, most of the stuff I was doing was really kind of my angry youth, you know, still coming out. The guy that would, you know, be rude to someone like Paul Dickman, and so I've been working on this testosterone music and making it like wool, like making it as intense as we possibly can. And so we make this song on the spot. And I'd been doing a bunch of hip hop stuff. We hadn't anything connect as well. And I was eclectic from day one, but it was really testosterone oriented. I hadn't even thought of balancing out masculine and feminine. Yin yang was not a concept in my 20 whatever brain. And so we're over at Happy's and we jam the song on the spot. And we're just laughing and loving it and having a good time. Afterwards, Carl said, I didn't think it was very good. I'm thinking, this is an absolute hoot. Nonetheless, very end of the session, two girls reemerge that we'd seen on the way in. And they're like, woo, put that on. And they start dancing around the studio and singing along to the chorus. And I was like, this is a first. Wow. I was like, whoa, something's going on here. So from the very point of inception, you know, the song's like 20 minutes old. Yeah. Out of the air, captured, documented. The rap in Loser is Beck holding a Radio Shack PZM microphone, which is a flat piece of metal. Yeah. It costs about $50.
I know those things, like you can tape them on walls and shit.
Exactly. Yep. And he's holding this flat piece of metal about the size of a couple of cards.
It's like a CD cover almost.
Yeah, exactly. Like holding a flat CD cover to your face and singing into it. With a little tiny wire coming out of it. And it's the first time he's ever rapped on mic, and he starts off doing that rap. And there's a point, if you listen closely, the first rap's about twice as long as the second. There's two raps in the Loser. And halfway through the first rap, there's a change in the vibe. It's like he's coming at it from a different angle, which is a normal thing in hip-hop. You know, kind of stop the tape, start over, and drop it in, and you know, coming left and right, like hitting you with this stuff. But anyway, there's a point in that song. So he raps this thing he's just sketched out on his notepad, and he raps until he falls off, and that's that point halfway through the first verse. So from the beginning, it's the first time he's ever rapped on mic, and there it is, and it's caught on this microphone. And when he falls off, we roll it back a few bars, wait for that last word to where he fell off and started laughing, and we drop it back in, and he does the rest of the song. And it's one take with just a restart.
One take.
One take.
Holy shit! Now, once he starts to explode, the labels are come around. He's about to do Mellow Gold.
Well, now we're working. So the concept, and we always had these lofty concepts, like when I was seeing him making Paul's Boutique and I was a runner, I was like, well, I should be doing that. And so, okay, I'm starting a label. And I told my friends, yeah, we're going to do these punk rock records first because we already have it around and then more added in, further, and we'll edit in. But we already knew we were already working with Muzzet Junkin. We already had the Grimace record in the can. Like, we're off and running, and we added stuff in. I said, but what we're going to break the label on is a 12-inch single with a beat, with a hip-hop beat. I'd said that from day one to Bradshaw and Rob Schaff, and they were just looking at me kind of like, what are you on, man?
Yeah.
Like, no, that's what we're going to do. And then we did it, and that's how it broke. And, absolutely nutty times.
Wow. I mean, Mellow Gold. Do you end up producing Mellow Gold? What do you do on that?
Yeah, so the loftiness, besides the idea that we're going to break the label on a 12-inch single, the loftiness is that I'm sort of saying, okay, we've got Loser in the can. People are reacting to it. Any walks of life, anybody we play it for likes it. Okay. So now let's make and I had a conversation with Beck at that point. Maybe we want to make this a project name because you're a really good folk artist. And maybe Beck wants to be a folk artist and some other name wants to be this hip hop experiment.
Oh, just like a side name, like, like Bad Robot or
yeah,
what?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Flaming Robot. Okay.
Yeah.
This hip hop folk experiment, and maybe you want to be, your own Beck as Woody Guthrie or Bob Dylan, and he looked at me and he said, "No, I'm down to do this as well." I said, "Okay, well then let's make a hybrid record. Let's make a 50-50."
Yeah.
And so then we knew that because the whole idea was that summer to drop Loser that summer that we dropped it as a 12-inch single and get a little bit of attention at college radio, which ended up becoming KCRW in Seattle and the rest of the country. Get a little bit of attention at college radio and we'd always do things that were wrong. The worst time to put out a single to college radio is in the summer because they're all on vacation.
Yeah.
But being in college radio in the past myself, I knew that whoever was there tending the station, they don't dry up and go away, would be glad to get something new because nobody else has said anything new. So let's put this out for college radio for the summer. When the kids get back, they'll see that Loser 12-inch is still sitting in the bin because nothing really came in the summer. They'll see that. And then for the fall, again, the worst idea, not knowing any better, fourth quarter, that's when all the releases come out from the majors.
Yeah.
Fourth quarter, we'll drop the album, which was Mellow Gold, didn't have a title at that point. We'll drop the Beck album, and they'll see the 12-inch single, and they'll see that in the summer everybody loved it, and then they'll already know who this guy is, and they'll play Mellow Gold, the album, whatever that is. And we knew the album was going to be, when he said he was down for doing hip-hop stuff as himself, then, we said, okay, great, well, we'll make a hybrid record. And that's why, and it was Beck's idea too. Two ideas, we went to sequence the album talking about the experience and whatnot, and we envisioned a side break, even though it was going to be primarily a CD format, but we knew there'd be a cassette, and we knew Bong Load was going to do the vinyl. So we envisioned a side break, and it was Beck's idea. Loser was already a hit. It's amazing making a record when you already have a hit. So he's like, let's put Loser first because that's what they're all coming for. And I didn't expect that. I was like, okay, great. Well, then if we're going to put Loser first, let's pull the rug out and put the quintessential folk song, Pay No Mind, second. And let's just establish the whole thing right there. And he's like, yeah, great. And off we went. And the rest just fell into place.
Now, was he starting to write these songs, or did he have a bunch of songs already to start working on Mellow Gold? Because if you look at it, you got Pay No Mind, a masterpiece. Fucking With My Head is unbelievable. Fucking with my head, just that way it is. The whole sound of this record is incredible. It's small and then it's big, it's like fucking with my head, and then you got Beer Can, which I love, and Soul Sucking Jerk. This thing is a fucking and nothing sounded like it. It comes out, you're like, holy shit. I mean, it changes the landscape immediately because it's not angry hip-hop rock, which comes later, you know what I mean, like Rage and stuff. Sure. It's this thing, it's like nothing ever. It's just, and of course, he's the new Dylan, Yeah. And really, to me, it was like a new Dylan because it was so fucking original. And it was all around songwriting, and it was all around, it was like the original hipster, It was just like, it was sayings, it was ring t-shirts, like a beer shirt, like Colt 45. It was all that weird slacker thing. It was what they were calling it, but.
So that's where the huge lesson came in, and we almost touched on it earlier. When you talked about that point, that's where I learned the lesson of the power of context. And that's why I talk about that 18-month period from when it was created to that summer that it became a phenomenon. And in that time period, Linklater mter made the film Slacker. and that got onto our radar. We'd never even heard the term slacker when we made Loser, and then. But everybody had heard the song, and we knew that they loved it. It's why we had our grandiose plan of going to college radio for the summer, and then with a single, and then an album in the winter. And but nobody knew what to do with it. We played it in New York at Polygram in an A&R meeting. Rob and I played Loser to a guy who had signed Bon Jovi, and couldn't be more of a non sequitur, And
who's that, like Rob Cavallo or something?
No, it's not Rob Cavallo, and I don't remember his name.
Right,
he was a wonderful gentleman in very New Jersey, very East Coast, very different coming from Humboldt. But he was a wonderful guy. But it was just like he was at that point, and you could just feel that we were the next wave. Whatever, we didn't know what the next wave was going to be.
Yep,
we knew we liked grunge, but we were the next wave. And
he didn't understand.
And he was like our dad at that point. But he was wonderful. And we put on Loser, and he's like, I love that. I don't know what the fuck you do with it, but I love it. And even the guy that signed Bon Jovi loved it, but he couldn't in his mind connect that it could ever be commercial. Well, he just knew he liked it. And,
it was so indie. It was the definition of indie.
The power of context. So Beck, and as anyone would, absolutely loathed having been called Loser, being called the slacker anthem, and him being the voice of Gen X.
Of course.
Nobody would like that. Dylan didn't like what got put on him. Beck didn't like it. Beck didn't play Loser for years, and when he did, he'd call it Snoozer or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like and you cannot until you've had that focus put on you. And it's easy to say that's silly, or it's hard to feel sorry for somebody that makes that much money or has that much freedom or whatever. However, and I can argue the other sense. It's like I feel that bad for how it turned out for Beck, but at the same time, once you've had that attention put on you, it is. And it sucks, and so you can totally understand why we didn't like it. But on the flip side, that's where we learned the power of context. Nobody knew what it was, and as soon as they said this is the slacker anthem and he is the voice of Generation X, the thing in the media, it was a pigeonhole for him, and the thing went nuclear. Yeah, and that's why he is alive and healthy today.
It was like grunge with the look. All of a sudden, you get the grunge look at Kmart or whatever. It's the same thing. Once people can figure out how to make money on it,
it's contextualized. But if Linklater hadn't done Slacker and it hadn't rose in prominence, by that point, it was a real eye-opener to me because I was watching it all happen in real time. We saw the idea of Gen X and Slacker, and even the film Slacker, reach the level of little quips in Newsweek magazine, little sidebar articles. Oh, there's a new thing going on. This is called Slack. This new Generation X. They're called slackers. They don't like to work, and they just take it easy all the time. Beck's like, my life was hell. I'm the antithesis of a slacker.
Right.
It's like.
And, that was that whole thing going on too. You got like Gummo, Kids, the movie Kids, and all of that kind of scene. But it was really like, to me, I never thought of it as a slacker. I always thought of it as like an artist world. To me, it really felt like a slacker. I don't know what the fuck you're talking about. To me, it felt like a scene. These guys had it was all about art. I mean, when you look at Kids, that movie, or Gummo, or any of that shit, that era then,
When I asked Beck how he'd come to on this path when I met him of being the most amazing folk artist I'd ever seen, raw as it was, he said, oh, well, I'd been living in New York for a little bit, and I ended up sleeping on couches, and I ended up with this guy who was the leader of this thing called anti-folk, which I hadn't even heard about. And there was this whole little thing, like a shimmy disc records was then, I think, kind of the hub of this anti-folk movement, certainly part of it. And so he'd been part of that. And he said, up to that point, I wasn't really writing songs. But when I was staying on this guy's couch, he said, if you're going to hang around with us, man, you have to start writing songs.
Wow.
And there was a guy in that same scene that I met years later briefly called Paleface. And you see the influence. If you go back and he did a couple records on Polygram, and I met his A&R guy, Joe Basso, who's also a journalist and amazing guy. And he'd signed Paleface, and he's like, here's the stuff. And he's like, and when Beck thing was blowing up, and we were doing the deal with Geffen, he's like, listen to this, you'll understand. And there's certain things on Mellow Gold that are an homage to a tribute to Paleface.
To Paleface, no shit,
some of the imagery,
wow, I got to check that out.
Bent Like a Wet Cigarette, I think, is lifted from Paleface.
Wow.
And so there's connections, there's direct lineage right back.
Right, giving them shout outs that way.
Absolutely,
unbelievable. The best thing that Beck did was a lot like Beastie Boys, constantly reinventing himself, not being pigeonholed into this box. Of course, he does Mellow Gold, Odelay, and then he whips out the masterpiece of all time, Sea Changes, that completely changes my life. Again, like, holy shit, here's a guy that could put out a melancholy record, you know? That's just insane.
Before we went, and through all that folk stuff, there was, at the very beginning, and before we went on the hip-hop tangent sidebar, which is what it really was initially, there was a pure, dark, yearning songwriter in there, and you could see glimpses of it. And I asked him about investigating more of that stuff early on. He said, well, I'd play in coffee houses or just bum rush punk rock shows and stuff and jump on stage, as you know, and, people don't want to hear that kind of stuff. They want to just laugh and whatnot. And so I just got off on that side of the fence. And so it was so awesome to see, because we saw the Bong Load crew, we all saw Beck as a career artist, and we were looking at, that was the filter we had on everything. So that's what we were looking for. We're looking for, like, and going back to you saying, what were you doing in the beginning? We're just looking for stuff that the majors were going to pass over and that could be really amazing and have a career. And so to see him go all that distance and then make some of those, some of those amazing and deeper records. I mean, the first maybe glimpse in that direction was after Odelay with Mutations.
Yeah.
And it goes a whole other level with Sea Change. Yeah.
Sea Changes is just, I saw it live, San Francisco, and it was funny because it was one of the weirdest shows I ever saw, and somebody and I asked recently, I had somebody on here that works with that plays with Beck now, and he said, nah, that's probably false. But the word around
Roger Manning?
Yeah, it was the word around town that he had tried acid before this gig, because I'd never seen Beck like this ever. He had a whole wall of different instruments, and he walked on, and he would just look at an instrument for about 2 or 3 minutes, and people were just kind of like, what's going on here? And then he'd pick one up and just go into a tune, pay no mind, or like, he'd play like, put your hands on the wheel. And it'd be this incredible version. Then he'd set the instrument down and then just walk around stage, scratching his head, looking at stuff, pushing buttons, and then pick something else up. You're like, what is going on here?
Sounds like a John Bryan at Largo on a larger stage.
But really like outside the box for him, because I had seen him so many times before, and he was more kind of like this coherent hip-hop kind of, killer moves. The whole show was kind of choreographed and all that. And this was just like, I wish I had it on video, because it was a magic night. And I walked out of there like, God, he'll never top that night. To me, like, that was insane. And then I asked Roger, he goes, I don't think he took acid. I was like, oh, man.
Well, you asked how he was in the very beginning when I first met him, and nobody knew he was outside of these little barbecues and punk rock shows. And everybody thought that he was way out there on whatever.
Yeah.
People would say, he's got to be a junkie, or he's an acid casualty, or whatever they say. People are always saying, nobody could figure him out.
Yeah.
And I spent a lot of time with him, and we became good friends. And he wasn't on anything. He was just like completely, other than kind of malnutrition, maybe.
Yeah. Well, that's just artists, you know what I mean? They always like, it's funny,
his
like
drive. One time I went over to pick him up to do something, go record some Library of Congress style stuff or something. I don't remember why, but it was in the afternoon. I had to drop by his place, that garage. The only time I went by that garage place, and I had to try to find it. It was behind the house in the alley and on the east side, and I finally find it, and I knock and I don't hear anything, and I go and I peer in the window, and you can see him through the window in this little tiny shack, and it really is a shack. He's sitting at this table, like unconscious to the world, but he's sitting at this table with a notepad and an acoustic guitar, and he's beating on the acoustic guitar with a hairbrush and yowling, and then pausing and writing some stuff down and going back to beating the acoustic
just breaking
guitar
in the beats like that.
He's making a riff on the acoustic, but instead of strumming it, he's beating it with a hairbrush.
Wow!
And his level of commitment, and and whatever time it was, 4:30 or whatever, that we'd agreed to meet and get him and go to do whatever little thing we were going to do. it was the time, but he was, had just switched off to the outside world. And he was outside the time-space continuum, and you just looked and you just like his level of commitment to the art form when there was no reason to be. Like nobody was waiting for the next Beck record. You know what I mean? He was just a guy. He was an outsider living on food stamps or whatever, and
just sounds in his head.
Like $400 a month or whatever he could scrape up. Yeah, and he was but that drive to get it, to pull it out of the ether and get it out and document it. It's just a beautiful thing.
The guy's fucking one of the best ever. I just saw him last year. He did some tracks with Jacob Dylan for this kind of. They did a record of like California sound, but not the obvious ones. They do like Mamas and the Papas. They do like Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, but not the not the obvious tunes. Right. They tracked the whole record. Fiona Apple also, and then they went downtown to one of the theaters there and shot it live, and it was just beautiful, And Beck, when he comes on. You just, first of all, you look at it and go, well, this guy's been playing music since I was a kid. And he was a kid too.
Yeah.
I'm 51 now. I don't know what he is. But you just think like, Loser could have easily just been one and done.
Yeah.
One and done. Especially when you got a song that big, people go, ugh. I don't need to hear this guy anymore.
Yeah.
But then he just kept reinventing himself and writing amazing songs. His shows were incredible. His shows are incredible, And now he has that band that's just so fantastic,
Yeah.
So, I mean,
long time.
It's amazing that you were there at that ground zero of that, because that was really that 90s is so. I used to shit on 90s music all the time. Not
right.
I was always like, 90s music's terrible. And then I'm like, what do I say that for? All my favorite shit's 90s besides 70s, 80s I like a few bands, Jane's, Guns, Aerosmith, but Aerosmith's really 70s.
Totally.
So when you get into the 90s and you get into all the different flavors, from Public Enemy and NWA to, Counting Crows, to Beck, to, all that whole thing, even Blind Melon, one of my favorites ever, It's amazing, the incredible, that whole nucleus of there was no styles. That's what I really felt about the 90s. It broke down walls. It was like, well, the Rage is hip hop, but they're metal also. Oh, Beck is like folk, but he's hip hop. Jane's Addiction is like psychedelic and Zeppelin, but they're their own thing. They got dreads and they wear like weird clothes. If there was no rules, it felt like in the 90s,
Yeah, and the Chili Peppers were writing their own script as well.
Absolutely, the Chili's. And a lot of that has to do with Perry Farrell putting together those Lollapaloozas and bringing everybody together. The only bad thing out of that was the tribal tattoo, probably, Other than that, it was just incredible, because you got to look at these Lollapaloozas. Like I went to all of them except the first one, but I went to one and it was Ice Cube, Pearl Jam, Soundgarden, Alice in Chains, and like Chili's or something, you know what I mean? It's just like, what? Ministry. Ministry was on the bill.
They're like around that one. I think they were like top of the bill or near it, right?
Yeah, they had the there. Just One Fix and all that. That great record there, and it just insane fucking lineup.
A friend of ours that worked at Grand Royal across the street from Bong Load in Atwater, then Fritz Michaud. He was on that tour. He'd come from Chicago. He's friends with the Ministry, and he went out on that one and. It was Ice Cube and the Lynch Mob, and he was like this, red-headed white guy, and he became friends with the Lynch Mob crew, and they were somewhere in the Midwest, and after a show, it was all milling out, never like the Stones or the Masters. So when the show's done, get the fuck out of there.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, there were just people, because it's a festival, people were around too long. Anyway, the Lynch Mob was getting ready to leave, and Fritz came across these, these kind of like. Skinhead-looking dudes that looked like they had a problem with the Lynch Mob.
Yeah.
And one of them had a chain, maybe another one had a pipe. There's definitely a chain involved, and they were like swinging it around, and there's like rumbling, and Fritz could see the whole thing, and I don't know how this came to be, but Fritz was up in a tree, like maybe he's chilling out up in this tree.
Yeah.
You know, like up in the first branch, whatever. He was chilling in this tree, and so he had this like literally bird's eye view.
Yeah.
And he watched the whole thing kind of assemble. He watched the lynch mob hanging on one side, like whatever at this venue, and he watched this people coming out of the parking lot and the intensity brewing, and right as it came to a head underneath the tree that Fritz was in, and he drops out of the tree and just takes the biggest swing he can at the first guy he sees.
Wow.
And breaks that bone that goes from like your pinky back to your wrist.
Yeah.
Busts that bone and clocking this guy, and there's a little bit of more of a skirmish, and those guys run off. And so, the lynch mob guys were like, "You're all right."
Yeah, yeah.
And the quote, they later when the dust settled and whatnot, they're like, "Man, you white people, we got another way of take care of business." And he pulls up his shirt, he's got a gun stuffed in his waistband. They were never worried.
Yeah. They were never worried.
And he's like, "You white people, man,
you're crazy throwing punches."
So they would say, he became known as, they're like, "Man, white boy be jumping out of the trees like he's Wolfman and shit."
Oh man, that is great, man.
So good.
That must have been wild just to be like on those tours back then. If you were just in one of the groups, because look who you're hanging with. That nucleus of like such the biggest thing was brewing. It was just about to explode.
The mixing of cultures, and at that point, around the same time, Ice-T was making his
Cop Killer,
exactly.
Body Count,
and so that desire, and Ice Cube and the Lynch Mob had agreed to go on the Lollapalooza tour, which had been established as kind of a rock tour.
Yep.
That interest of not merging, but of celebrating different cultures. This was really the beginning. This was where, and one of the amazing things that happened in the 90s was we started to see, as you've talked about before, the idea at one point in the 70s and 80s of spending your money on that band, and that became your identity. You were a metalhead, or you were into the Cure or whatever. And you were goth.
Yeah, goth, metal.
You were that thing. But this is the point.
Rednecks, the country.
This is the point in the 90s, and way more happened just a little bit later by the birth of the MP3, really cemented it. But this is the beginning of where people started to celebrate diversity.
Yeah.
And everybody wanted to come together and meet under the guise of music. And that story of Fritz and the Ice Cube just shows culturally how far apart they were.
Yeah.
That he think, I have to defend these guys with my fists, and they're thinking like, there's not going to be a problem here. We got it covered. And but the beauty of it, the same way that and going back maybe to the 60s, the same way that the British would look at America, the cultural differences have always been really, really like such a rich source point for me. Like the way that the British would look with envy, like the Beatles would look at Motown with envy.
Yeah.
And then the way that American bands would look at the British pop bands with envy, and then they'd try to assimilate that into their thing, but you can never escape your culture and your roots, and so it becomes this perverted, sort of attempt at the other, but brilliant in its own right. And so so in the 90s, you really had that thing come together, and those bills got really diverse and eclectic, and it was kind of the portal to where we are today.
Yeah, it's really crazy. I feel like we've just gone backwards, It's back to, I mean, other than Coachella and stuff where they do really mix it up and everything, but as far as like the way music's marketed,
backwards in that way.
Right, backwards in that way.
I was thinking full circle in the beauty of people being into eclectic stuff and rediscovering the album vinyl experience, but backwards in that way. In the mainstream, backwards in a negative way,
Yeah, it's just strange how like they just like market stuff just to like certain flavors, like this is hip hop, and it's just kind of like, it's just music. You know what I mean? It's like everything's just, it all comes down to labels so they can sell something, But when you looked at that Lollapalooza or even the Horde, and I really think as growing up, I was like, fucking hippies. Now when I look back at it, like they really nail it, man.
They had a lot of stuff figured out right.
They really do. It's all about, hey man, let's just pick each other up. Let's celebrate and love some music and each other, and dig these vibes, which sounds corny, but when you look at it in this friction world now, you're
when
like,
it actually happens.
Yeah, and when it actually happens, it's amazing, man. I went to see the Dead last year in Boulder, here. And I'd never felt so like just alive. Like, man, these people are all here, 70,000 people, because of this music that was started in 67 or whatever, you know? And look at this thing.
Yeah.
People just love it.
Yeah, I had dinner in Las Vegas, which turned into 3 a.m. really fast with a dear old friend in the contemporary. I guess we could say he's a bluegrass guy, and he comes. His name's Jeff Austin, and he comes from a band called Yonder Mountain String Band, which has had an amazing like 20+ year career already now. And he was talking about. We were talking about the journey of music, a similar conversation we're having now. We're playing catch up and trading stories and reminding ourselves of old stories. And I made 2 albums with him years ago, and he told a story of going. The bass player in the Grateful Dead has
Phil Esch.
Yeah, has a venue up in Northern California, Bay Area, and he talked about going and performing there, and with Yonder. They went up there and did it years ago, and it was just amazing to hear him talk about it. Like so here's this guy, you know, and he was referring to the Grateful Dead as a band, you know, with generational cash, generational money, and I thought that was an interesting way of putting it. Yeah. I get it.
Yeah.
And it's like, so here's this guy on a completely other level, and not getting back, but it's exactly what we're talking about. People that are true to the music. You know, those are the people that music made for musicians, made by musicians, for musicians, and for people who love music. That's where it's at, and that's where you've got to give it to the hippies and the Grateful Dead. So here he is, well into his career, has his own little venue. Jeff said it holds about 300 people or something, and they're going to play there. And so to play this 300-person gig, you have to show up the day before. And he spends the whole day with you the day before, working up the set for the next night.
Yeah.
For 300 people.
Yeah.
The guy in the Grateful Dead. And so,
he does that like once a week now.
Yeah.
You know?
And he's like, yeah, we'll do some of your songs and some of mine. And it's not going to be like a Dead tribute. I want you to use your voice. I don't want you to try to imitate what they've done. Just amazing. This whole experience. It's like, we talked for ages about that and how it morphed and how they jammed live. And how Jeff at one point they were playing one of his songs and Yonder songs that Jeff leads. All the guys in the band write and sing, and it's one of the Jeff led songs. And they start. Jeff realizes they're playing it, and it's in the same key, and it's just a turn of a screw away from a really famous Dead riff that starts with him on bass. And so he starts to tease it on the mandolin. His guitar player picks up on it and fills in a bit more of the gaps and doubling up on acoustic. And then, the guy from the Dead clocks it and then just like drops into it. And it's not in the script. It's not in the plan. And the whole crowd
all of a sudden they just drifted into like trucking.
And it turns into a Dead song, and the crowd goes crazy. And that's where it's...
That's the shit, man. That's the next level.
About it.
All right, now we got to get into like, of course, Beck was the ground zero. But this stuff, your list of stuff, Badly Drawn Boy, I remember when he was red hot, which what happened to him? Is he still around? I don't hear about him at all anymore. I saw him, I had one of his records, saw him at the Fillmore back in the day.
Yeah.
What was his name?
His name's Damon Goff.
Oh, that's it, yeah.
And he's a good friend, and we trade messages every few weeks. And I went to see him in Manchester. And I'm trying to think about, it's interesting. There's I don't talk about too many things that are private. Actually, in this conversation, we talked about a lot of what was once private moments, and it's kind of a rare conversation. So, like when I think of Damon, I'm sifting through my head I'm thinking about what he's talked about with this publicly, because you lose so much of your privacy in the business. But what happened is he had an amazing career and run, and it was always centered in England. And he still does festivals every year in England, and he's still a dude, and he's doing very well. But he hasn't done something that's been broader reaching in a while, and his prolific output has gone way down, and he's talked about it a bit in the British press, but it hasn't been at all reached over here. What happened is he was known for erratic shows, and you'll find out in the press he played at Troubadour, and it got all glued just a few years ago in LA, but one of the last times he was here. And what had happened was, and this is me sort of interpreting, but that beautiful as his music is, we never escaped that sort of childhood rage, and I think that there was something in his life that was making him unhappy, and then he talked about in the press about he just said, I have to make some changes in my life, and he picked the largest thing he could think of, and he stopped drinking alcohol.
Right.
And this was about 18 months ago, 15 months ago. And
so his erraticness was from being an alcoholic?
And I'm just adding in there that, there was some dissatisfaction. Who knows where from? We all have it.
Absolutely.
And you've got a guy who's one of the most wonderful people you could ever meet, and he's got some kind of gremlin on it, demon chasing him around, and that would come out sometimes, and well documented publicly. And so then he makes a private choice, which has now been a public discussion, but he made a private choice to just walk away from alcohol, and he went to a rehab and came out of there. He approached sobriety. We got together and had dinner after about 3 months into his sobriety about a year ago, and I went to Manchester and saw him. And from my vantage point, having spent a year straight in the studio with him, this is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. He approached sobriety the way he approached music. He just went all in.
Yeah.
And and it was just absolutely owning it the way he'd owned Beautiful Melody at one point. The most of the music that I've been involved with that anyone would have heard of, you were talking about, working at stuff at Ground Zero. Beck, Ground Zero outside the major label system. First Foo Fighters record, mixed it at our studio in Humboldt, outside the system. Dave Grohl was a free agent. And Elliott Smith, first record, we made in our studio in Humboldt, and it ended up on Kill Rock Stars. And Badly Drawn Boy was already a Mercury Prize winning indie label artist in the UK. In the UK, it's small enough that any label can act. It was conservative music like a major. Very different scene. So, but he was considered an indie artist in the UK. But we started working on this film score, the first thing we did together, About a Boy. And we had this idea, again, always having lofty ideas, that we were going to do something that kind of occupies a space that hadn't been done since the 60s, of The Graduate and Midnight Cowboy. Artist-driven film music.
Oh, that's cool.
That's bespoke for the film, and so off we went. And a lot of the things, even going back to the idea of working outside the system, James Blunt's first album, which was the best-selling record of the past decade, and it's in the Guinness Book of the World Records in the UK and stuff, that was made outside the system. It was funded by Linda Perry, who you know, and she footed the bill. I thought
James Blunt. I mean, that thing is fucking massive.
And you couldn't think of a more, if anybody was going to call somebody a sellout or based on commercial success, that would be the one. But that was completely an independent record made outside the system, footed by Linda Perry entirely.
Wow.
And in the trash can. And I mention that because many of my projects have been in the trash can. Some of them stayed in the trash can.
Wow.
Who knows what would have happened?
Somebody worked on it and then said, "See ya."
Or you work on it, and it becomes orphaned. James Blunt's record, Back to Bedlam, became orphaned and was most likely never going to come out. And it got picked up in the UK by Warner's and came back out, and came out, and it was a miracle. We were working on About a Boy, Badly Drawn Boy and I, in LA, and it was great. The British music business is still full of classic, as you'd picture, cigar chomping characters.
Yeah.
Except they have British accents, and they're still there, and they're amazing and wonderful. And it's a more cavalier market in a sense because of this. And there's these little fiefdoms and islands and stuff, and so they'll just do stuff on a lark, and sometimes that's great, sometimes it's not. They apparently had paid like £300,000 to Working Title, to the film company doing About a Boy, for the rights to put out their own artist. Badly Drawn Boy,
yeah.
XL Recordings he was signed to XL, and XL pays the film company. I was like, shouldn't the film company kind of be paying them to borrow the artist?
Yeah, right.
And here we are in LA making the score and soundtrack simultaneously. We're doing original songs and score, and they paid like $300,000. Like, it's probably and converted to dollars, it's probably like $500,000 just to put him out.
Yeah.
Now they are also footing the bill they're footing all the bill. And I think the way that it was supposed to work
For the recording?
For the recording. And I think the way it was supposed to work was that, the film company would pay for the orchestral part and they would pay for the song part. But it all became a blur. We were doing it all simultaneously. Yeah. There was another, Steve McLaughlin was on it. It was amazing. Producer of a film score. So we all three of us are in the studio making stuff, and we had 2 rooms going simultaneously and trading ideas back and forth. And one day I came into the studio, and in Hollywood, and the manager meets me in the parking garage. He's like, Tom, like, the labels just said they're not going to pay another fucking dollar on this thing, and they're really furious. And you guys run up this huge bill, and you're fucking ordering that expensive whiskey every day, and all that food, and I was like, hold on, time out, let me get on the phone. It went to the courts in England. So one day, the people at XL had got in, being the awesome, the cavalier as the British record execs can be. They came in and said, well, Jesus Christ, we paid $300,000 and these studio bills are getting fucking huge. And so the number 1 guy says to the number 2 guy, what the fuck historically did these singer-songwriter film score soundtrack, what the fuck did these sell? And so they Googled it up and they're like, oh, they average about, 18,000 or whatever the number was. Whoa. And they were like, fuck this.
Yeah.
Stop it now. And they said, fuck it, don't pay anything.
Yeah.
And it got taken to the courts. And in American law, I think they would have been in the rights. But in British law, the management took it to the courts while we were still working away and just begging the studio manager to keep the lights on for us. That'll work out.
Yeah.
I had no idea what was going to happen. That thing was in the trash. And so the courts say, the managers make the point to the courts, like, look, these people, XL, gave the green light for this artistic endeavor. These people are working on it in earnest and reporting every day and week. Every day they get the studio bill. This is not like we just pulled this. This has been going on incrementally, and they're aware of it. And they never said, no, you can't stop now and leave this whole thing hanging. And there's a responsibility to the film company as well. And you can't do this. And, the courts agreed. And they turned the money back on. And
wow.
So out of the trash can it came.
And then it sells huge, right?
And then it sold. It was record setting, and then so they made lots of money. And once again, out of the trash and into the green, out of the trash and into the cash. And so it's really, really remarkable. And then later I was told by when I was then composing for film had always been a dream, and so. And I'd worked at Stage M as a peon when I was at Record Plant as a setup guy with the orchestras, and it was like, one day I've got to. And so when they called me up on About a Boy, and with Elliott Smith and stuff, we'd incorporated a lot of orchestral stuff. And as the budgets got bigger at DreamWorks, thanks to Lenny Warnaker and Luke Wood and crew, so we'd worked with these elements a lot, and we'd been around film, and it had always been my dream. So when I got the call to work on About a Boy, I was like, well, you just made the right call. I mean, not only do I know how to make a singer-songwriter record, but I also know a lot about the film scoring world, and I can put together arrangers and orchestra dates, and we can really do this up right. And as I was working on that, and we were writing on the fly, and it was really, really, really beautiful. I had in the dust settled in the next year. I thought it set about on my path of doing my own film score work, and a call came out of the blue as I was preparing for that. It's like luck favors the prepared sort of cliche. I'm working on getting my chops together, and I've contacted my arranger Suzy Katayama and said, hey, I'm gunning for a film score in the next year, and she said, yeah, I'm in, whatever you need. It's like, maybe you can help me do the mock-ups and stuff. I'm going to do some stuff to proof of concept. And she says, yeah, sure. And one night, we're working on James Blunt's Back to Bedlam record. And one night, I'm closing up, and I say to my engineer, to Mike Tarantino, who's helping me put together these sketches that we're going to send to Susie. And I'm like thinking, again, wrong. I'm thinking, well, Hollywood always makes action adventure films. And so let's make stuff geared towards an action adventure because I always make them. Later, I learned, it's just like with Bong Load. Let's do this and put out a record in the fourth quarter. And it's the worst idea. I was like, yes, they make them all the time, but if you know anything about film scoring, the mechanics of it, they're the most sought after and highest budget ones. And good luck, it's always going to be some Oscar-winning composer. But I thought, let's gear it towards an action adventure film. And so I say to Mike Tarantino that night, I'm back to Bedlam. James has gone home, and we're touching on these film cues to get to Susie and buttoning up the night. And I said, let's make 2004. late in 2003, I think. So let's make 2004 the year of the action adventure film. And while we're at it, let's make it a big ass action adventure film. The next day, I got a call from Sunset Sound going, "Hey Tom, this guy keeps bugging us for your number because you can see on all these records like Elliott Smith and stuff that you've worked at Sunset the most of any studio in Hollywood, and he says he works for the film director Michael Mann, and we won't give out his number, but he's been going on for months." And I'm like, "Well, give me his number." He's like, "Yeah, here, that's why I said, "Yeah, that's why we're calling you. Here it is." And I called this guy Marshall. And he's like, "Oh my gosh, you're Tom Rothrock. Thank goodness. All right, my boss Michael Mann is working on a film, and I got to get you on the phone with him. Hang on a second. You just saved my job." And he's like,
wow.
He's like, "Yeah, hey Tom, it's Michael Mann. I'm making a film. I'm going to send you the script. Can you meet tomorrow at 3? I was like, "Yeah, I'll be there." And he's making Collateral, and then
wow,
there I am making a film, and so.
You score for Collateral?
Yeah, with 2 other composers, avant-garde Brazilian Antonio Pinto and the Oscar-winning James Newton Howard. And so we have about equal amounts of music in the film with us. And so it's an amazing team. And a lot of times, Michael Mann's setting up, pitting people against each other. We're unbeknownst to each other, we're scoring the same scene. He's going to pick through them.
Oh, yeah.
He's known as not only is he a director's director in Hollywood, but he's also known as the most difficult man to work with in music. And that was my entry point into being a composer myself. So anyway, back to About a Boy. We finished in the midst of all this. The woman coordinating all the music, Vicky Hyatt, tells me, "Well, Tom," because I told her the story about how About a Boy was in the trash, almost never happened. There's also another in the trash story about how the film studio heard the first glimpses of this music and were like, "What the fuck is this?
Yeah.
Go get a real composer." And that got finessed over. So it almost got thrown out for the money, and it almost got thrown out for the material. And then it managed to happen, About a Boy. And then years later, I'm working on Collateral, and Vicky Hyatt tells me, "Well, that was like the most emulated dramatic score, like chick flick score for years. That was massively influential. Nobody had heard anything like that since The Graduate." I was like, "Well, that's what we were trying to do."
Wow.
So
that's amazing.
Even when we're in the system, sometimes we're basically outside the system. And
Academy Award from that?
About a Boy?
Nominees, or what was going on? Grammy nominees?
No, I don't think so. Maybe because it was a British-centered production.
Gotcha.
Shot in Britain. It was a hybrid American-British. Yeah. No Oscar. Nothing. Action, no Grammys on Collateral or About a Boy.
What? Okay, let's get into Elliott Smith. Elliott Smith, the course, Figure 8, one of my favorite records. Stupidity Tries, just a fucking masterpiece song. I can't even believe that song. Whenever I hear it, I just go, well, that would be the Beatles if they were together now, Elliott Smith, one of the greatest, to me, he's like the Bill Hicks of music, meaning, there's such a core underground love for Elliott Smith. This guy was next level, man. And you worked with him, of course.
We did. Rob and I worked with Elliott together, and we did basically everything for a 5.5-year run, and everything, and the Figure 8 was the last thing that was, done in its entirety with him while he was alive.
Yeah,
and that came out.
Yeah, I got the one after.
Everything else is
it's got canned stuff,
other filters on it. Yeah, it's gone through other filters after the fact, and we never knew exactly what his ultimate intentions were with that stuff, or the demos and stuff that he never wanted to come out. But I don't begrudge that because we all want a glimpse in whichever way we can get one.
Especially once somebody's gone. I mean, exactly. Look at all the Cobain stuff.
Exactly. You're looking for some little insight or clue or breadcrumb.
I mean, he was really, really a dark guy, right?
If we break out, a lyric book of Elliott Smith, it's going to look pretty dark. But and in person, the intensity of the sessions could be really, really intense. But he never. So sometimes there was a cloud around the sessions, and it would permeate you. It's where I learned that that sort of intensity is contagious. It's in the quantum level. If one atom's spinning one way and one's another, eventually they'll come. As Elliott said, crooked spin can't come to rest. Well, it does. It might not come to rest, but it does come in unison. And so, really, really intense. But he never pointed that at anyone. Do you know what I mean? If he was a loaded gun, he never pointed it at anyone.
It was always inside, internal.
He's the most sweet, beautiful, one of the most sweet, beautiful people I've ever known. And similar to Badly Drawn Boy in that way. You know? And even if Damon, Badly Drawn Boy, you know, as is, you know, there's plenty of stories in the press about him lashing out at an audience or a heckler or something. You know, he would tell me, just be wrought with remorse after the fact. And, that's
coming back to me now. He was on that tour and having meltdowns all over America, right?
Yeah, but
I just remember that now. It just came to me. It was like, it was almost like people were going to see the car crash, you know?
It became, Andy Kaufman that way. Yeah. And, but Elliott absolutely, you know, I couldn't say enough nice things about him.
The guy, man. Now, were those records 8-track, like just done old school?
You couldn't imagine everything. You know, Speed Trials on Either Or, which Either Or is right now having its 20th birthday this month, and so that song Speed Trials, he had it on a 4-track cassette, and we mixed it in my studio in Humboldt. In the shop, we mixed it. We plugged the 4-track cassette deck into the board and mixed it through the API off the cassette.
Wow!
We're like, great, that one's done. And then in other ones, we would. He brought in a bunch of ideas in various formats, and he brought in a couple things on a half-inch 8-track that he had in his early records, his first 2 records, a lot of half-inch 8-track in his basement. And he brought in some starts from that, and we'd maybe keep the acoustic guitars or something and transfer them to a 2-inch 16-track, which we had 24-track heads for this deck. We also had 16-track heads. And knowing that he was bringing in ideas on 4-track and 8-track, we said, well, let's not get crazy. Let's limit ourselves. Let's just do it deliberately on 16-track. And so that record's Either Or is 16-track. In the end, stuff ends up on that. But he was like Beck. Was an eclectic multi-format. You know, basically like, you know, it's the equivalent of a cocktail napkin, whatever's the nearest thing.
However you can get it on.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
God, man, it's insane how great that Figure 8 record is, you know? That painting when I drive by. I lived in Silver Lake, and I just drive by it I heard it's getting ready to go tear down or something, or is it gone?
I just caught that, you know, that stuff. People are always, you know, when they see something, they'll send me a message or whatever. And so I caught that one a couple weeks ago. Yeah. They're making it, you know, some, as Silver Lake continues, it's, you know, some kind of cool spot, a wine bar or something.
Well, that thing was like a weird electronics store, right?
It's a speaker store.
Yeah, speaker store. I remember I'd go in there.
That's why those waves were on.
It was almost like a hoarder guy in there. It was just like a cage. He had all this gear and shit. You'd look around like, what is this place, you know?
There's one of those in Las Vegas, and it's amazing. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it's so cool. Yeah, so that they cut that hole out. Right in the middle of those waves, they cut it all out, and it made it a window. But I don't know if it's good or bad, but they know what it is, and they took it. And they cut it out, and they took it and they stuck it on the inside wall.
Oh, at least they kept it. That's dope.
So it's going to be,
Oh, that's cool.
Pretty smart marketing plan for the business.
Absolutely. I remember they were tearing down this venue on Haight Street, Last Day Saloon, I think it was called, or where, across the street from the I-Beam, and they were about to tear it down. And these guys were in there working, and me and my buddy were walking by, and we're like, what's going on? And they're going to make this shops now. And they weren't looking, and we just went into the back. It was a movie theater, and then it became a kind of a live place. And we're looking in the dressing room, and the signatures in there. You know, it's like Jerry Garcia and all this. I was like, man, we got to cut these out right here, man. This shit is worth money, you know? It's not necessarily worth money. It's history, you know what I mean? It was just so insane to see all these autographs in there of everyone that was like any Haight Street hero, you know?
Yeah.
Rad, man. It's funny that like stuff like that just goes away. People don't even think about it. So I'm glad they saved that. I mean, that's so iconic. Many times it had been graffitied or whatever, and they would redo it, you know?
Yeah.
Now you've done so much stuff, man. R.L. Burnside, the song for fucking Sopranos. How does that come about?
Beck turned me on to the label Fat Possum. John Spencer had turned Beck on to
John Spencer's Blues Explosion?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
there's a name I haven't heard in a long time.
Beck was a huge fan. You know, he had Pussy Galore before that, John Spencer.
Right, yeah.
And he started John Spencer Blues Explosion. And I didn't know Pussy Galore, I just knew the name. And Beck and I were traveling from Humboldt down through San Francisco, and we stopped in a record store, and there was the Extra Width EP, the John Spencer EP, and I think he bought it. He definitely pointed out in the rack if he didn't buy it. And I was like, what's this? He's like, oh, this is John Spencer, the guy from Pussy Galore. I was like, oh, okay, I clock Pussy Galore. Okay, great. He's got a new thing now. And then we started getting into that, and I bought a copy of Extra Width and was digging it. And so then when this is when Losers recorded, but Mellow Gold's not out yet. It's not a thing. There's nothing going on. And went up to Humboldt. Beck was writing some songs, and we recorded some on the DAT tape, Lomax style. And then we coming back down to LA, and I get an Extra Width, listen to that, and then Mellow Gold blows up in a year or so, half a year into that. We're in this festival called Memphis in May, in Memphis, of course, and Beck's opening for Bob Dylan, and he takes a side with his video filmmaker friend Steve Hampt. Made the Loser video. The three of us did it on a road trip up to Humboldt and back, another road trip. Anyway, they go out and they visit this label that John had told them about, Fat Possum Records, a juke joint in the countryside that Junior Kimbrough was the center of that community. He had this juke joint out in the country, crossroads in the country. And they went out and checked it out, and they brought back photos and stuff, and they just couldn't believe it. I was like, whoa, what is this? So then I started listening to the Fat Possum stuff, and I was like, it was to me like a time warp. It's like there were actually, because blues had become a thing, it become a commercial thing, like how hip hop was really raw at first,
right,
and it became like a thing,
Right. Oh yeah, totally.
Naturally,
well,
it has to.
Stevie Ray starts getting blues back again, and then all of a sudden you got like all these guys playing blues, and then of course you got like regular guys just like, we're a blues band now. Yeah,
and Robert Cray's big then, and he's wonderfully talented, but very safe and very polite.
Yeah,
and relative to the idea of Robert Johnson or something, where we all touch back to, of course. And so all of a sudden I hear Fat Possum Records, and it's like
Time Machine.
It's fucking dangerous and raw and doesn't give a fuck. Yeah. And it is there. Those artists are playing for their community. They're playing for the neighborhood, and you're just like, and it's unaffected by all this evolution. Unbelievable. And so completely mind blowing. And so it didn't take too long to till suddenly got an invitation, mutual friends and acquaintances and whatnot, and suddenly got an invitation on RL's 70th birthday. He was passing through LA on a show. Fat Possum needed a couple songs more for a record, and we arranged a live session at our friend's studio, Doug Messenger's in North Hollywood, so we went, and that was been a dream on the bucket list at that point, was to do a live blues or jazz session, and both. We later did a jazz one, but both those you kind of have to do if you're going to be in recording and production. You have to do, you have to get into that live world, and you have to pay homage to the blues and jazz. And so here we are doing this with Junior Kimbrough and RL were my two favorites on Fat Possum, and so here we are with one of them, RL, on his 70th birthday with his band, his grandson on drums, and his illegitimate adopted sanctified son, as he would often say on stage, Kenny Brown, the white guy, and on guitar, and two guitars and drums. And so we do this live session, and I'm just 4 or 5 songs we threw down, and I'm kind of walking out of the thing. And the owners of the label, Bruce Johnson, and Bruce and Matthew, rather, from Fat Possum are there, and Matthew Johnson and Bruce Watson. And so we're walking out, and Matthew says, in his mumbling kind of genius way, he says, "Hey Tom, I always like you do that like remix style stuff with Beck and everything. What if you take some of these masters that we just did? Tell you what, I'll take the mixes of these live recordings. You keep the masters, and why don't you just do something with them?" And I'm thinking to myself, this is, ironically, I'm thinking this is sacrilege. Like, this is like your artists are the greatest living direct lineage to what it's all about.
Super organic, just blues.
Raw.
Yeah.
Live, raw. We just did live, no overdubs, no punching in, just, those guys would tune up in the studio. They wouldn't wear headphones.
No headphones.
No headphones. They had their amps were all around them. No isolation, no separation, no classic recording stuff. All in a circle in the room. And no headphones, and they wouldn't even you wouldn't tell them rolling. In fact, we learned real fast when they're tuning the guitars. You better be fucking ready with your hand on the record button.
Yeah, because they're just gonna start going.
They just start playing.
Yeah.
No headphones. No. Are you ready? No, they just start playing. And if you don't get it, you don't get it.
Wow.
So I'm walking out of this session. I never seen anything like it. And we pull it off, and I'm feeling stoked and proud. And he says, "Would you want to remix this?" And I was like, "That's completely sacrilegious." And then he, and he explained why. And of course, I couldn't resist. I said, "Okay, I made a deal on the spot. It's a verbal deal." I said, "Okay, I'll tell you what. I'll do it. And if it can be done, I don't even know if it's possible, but if something can be made, then I put out the first thing we make as a single on Bong Load.
Yeah.
And we'll talk after that. So if I'm going to take this chance," and so we did it, and we made a song, and he gave me some more material, and RL telling a joke and stuff live at a gig, and we made this little tiny EP called RL Burnside on Bong Load, and then I said, and then if it works creatively, then we'll do the single on Bong Load, and if that doesn't get us killed, then we can talk about more, because he's like, I one of the things he said that really made me say, okay, I'll do it. It's like RL has done. He told us he's not writing any more songs. He's done. He's had his share of whiskey and women. And he's very happy. Yeah. And he's lived his life, and he's just going to keep playing the songs he already has. But we're a record label. We need a new record. So there's not going to be another R.L. Burnside record.
You got to invent the new record.
Yeah, well, these couple songs you did today to fill out the current one, this new R.L. Burnside record that we're just finished today, that's the last one.
Wow.
So if you can come up with something, then there might be another R.L. Burnside record. And I thought, well, all right. And so we came up with something, and it worked. And then that turned into the Come On In record. And then that got picked up and put into Sopranos.
How does that happen though? It's like
it went crazy. I was so happy because of working with people. And that wasn't ground zero, but in a way, again, it was with RL, because he then lived the rest of his life in a level of comfort and an appreciation for his craft that he'd never experienced prior.
Oh yeah, just getting paid from that tune, right?
I mean, all of a sudden he would get flown out to, like, a film director's having a birthday party or something, and he gets flown out on a private
just to play that song,
and gets paid real money, cash.
Wow!
And his life completely changed for the better in that. And suddenly he's like, headlining Spaceland, and it's packed with hipsters like down the block.
Yeah,
it's like his life.
I mean, what a great tune, all I see is Tony Soprano with the cigar and the Escalade. You're just like, this is great, man. Yeah, I mean,
absolutely amazing. Yeah,
and then the show explodes. It could have just been a fucking whatever show.
Yeah.
God,
Synergy.
Man, that is so. I mean, did you make some big paper on that or what?
Well, that led to the stuff getting. So this record it was the first record that the entire project was a series of co-writes. So I'd take a sample and of something maybe existing from his repertoire and make a new song out of it.
Yeah.
And so we shared that, and so it was a big step for myself artistically, and a risk to R.L. Burnside as well, in that wasn't what he was known for.
Right. Yeah.
Everybody had guts. He had huge balls, obviously, and everything that he did, he just owned it. So it was it was really, really great to see. So that led to I remember a Canadian U.S. Nissan Frontier pickup truck advertisement, and this was around, and that cash came through around the time we were working on About a Boy, and I remember pooling all the money together and getting a down payment on my house in Hollywood, where I then recorded Back to Bedlam and did the film score for Collateral, and
wow.
And that was inspired by the Dust Brothers in the house you were describing earlier. I was like, I'd like to have a house in the hills that looks out over the city. I bet we can make some inspired stuff.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
To me, those hills really they're full of just ghosts and
ghosts
demons
and
shit that really fly around and jump onto people and just, it's like art ghosts. And just this magic comes out of these people, and then the art ghost flies away to somebody else. It really, when I'm up in there, I'm trying to get back there now constantly, because I lived there 13 years, and I lost the place because the owners moved their daughter in. And I really feel the magic of those hills, man. It goes all the way back to if you get into like,
Absolutely.
the Eagles and Jackson Brown and,
Yeah.
and all of that fucking shit of just living in that, East Hollywood, East Hollywood really has something,
Yeah.
It really does.
You can feel it. You can feel it in the air. And the interesting thing about those artistic endeavors is there are those places, and Joshua Tree is its own one of those.
Oh, absolutely.
The outlying one.
Oh, come on, man.
And,
Those guys out
you
there.
You can really feel it. And it's interesting. One doesn't understand unless one's involved in the creative process and creating something, again, out of the air that doesn't exist. And there's a reason why those places are known. Topanga Canyon is Topanga Canyon. Joshua Tree is Joshua Tree.
Laurel Canyon.
And Laurel Canyon is Laurel Canyon. The Hollywood Hills are the Hollywood Hills. It really is amazing. Art, it's interesting when you make this stuff. You get in that environment where a flow can occur. You get in the flow and you create something, and it's a beautiful process because you're making something in private. And it's a complete private, personal expression that is ultimately going to be a public expression.
Yeah.
And that process is pretty remarkable.
It's so magic, man. You've done so much great stuff. I looked at it here. I mean, you worked with Motörhead. You worked with Poison. What'd you do with them?
Ground Zero again. Not for them, for me and my buddy Rob. We had freaking nothing going on. That's a funny little. That's a weaving one as well.
What era of Poison?
The absolute peak of their career. And so here are these two guys, off the street that have no business being, and no producer in the studio, just us, us and Poison. So it was the week that, it was their absolute apex. It was the week that Flesh and Blood came out, and Unskinny Bop had been warming up rock radio, and the record was coming out that week, and the tour started in 10 days or so. And that window of time, they felt like they'd worked the new material up, and so that window of time leading up to the 10 days before the tour, they went in the studio because they knew on that tour they were going to make a live record because they'd never had a breath.
Oh yeah.
And
you do the cover?
And so we went in and we did 4 original studio tracks to stripe on to. Brett was convinced, because he's a huge Kiss fan, that the record was going to be double CD because of the double live Kiss record. That
like Kiss Alive 1 and 2.
Exactly. And so he's like, I have to have a double CD, and so at the end of it we'll stripe on these 4 originals and use them as singles to push it. And that's what they did. And the album Swallow This Live got recorded during that tour, 4 different venues, and so we made these 4 studio tracks at the top of the tour. They went on tour, and then Brett called us up at the end of the tour. He started to mix it with the guy who mixed their previous record and wasn't vibing right away, and so stopped. Said, no, not feeling it. I need to be there. I can't be. Let's just say time out.
Yeah.
And then he called us up and said, hey, guys, I started mixing it, but I stopped, and I think you guys should mix this record. I mean, what an amazing call. So we not only did we do the 4 studio tracks, but then we did mix the 4 studio tracks and assembled out of 4 shows the whole live record. Like, they were Rob and I in picking takes and doing this, that, and the other, and then just sending it by the guys. And they were on the first break they'd ever had, so they were like, yeah, go for it, guys. Knock yourselves out.
Yeah.
And so we just got paid to be in this amazing private studio for months on end, assembling this live record.
Wow.
Yeah, it's another one of those people. Like, it's such a humbling thing, and the music business or life, I guess, is so humbling. And back when I was at that college radio station, Poison came out with their first record.
Yeah,
and I'm in.
Look where the cat dragged in.
Exactly, and I'm on my high horse of
indie
freeform college radio.
Oh yeah,
and I'm playing metal but playing Johnny Cash, whatever the hell I want. And I see this band and I see their influences. One of the first times I could so clearly, for whatever reason, on Poison, I could see their influences. I could see that, I could see CeCe lifting Steve Jones, licks off of Nevermind the Bollocks. I can see him interpreting Steve, interpreting Chuck Berry, and I'm like, I'm not having it. In this sort of New York Dolls glammed up version of it. It's like, no, I like my Steve Jones Sex Pistols style. Thank you. And then I can see Brett, just taking stuff straight off the stage from David Lee Roth, and I'm like, no, thank you. I'll have my David Lee Roth.
Yep.
My David Lee Roth moves.
Yeah.
And so I developed this real prejudice against against, as you do as an angry young man, against Poison. And so I'd tell all my friends, like, this is the worst band ever, yada, yada, yada. And so they became the band that I complained about the most. And who's the guy in Hollywood that gives me my first break? Bret Michaels. Man, I just went,
hilarious.
and I just had, and ever since.
Talk about a sellout, man. You went and worked for him.
I'm the biggest sellout there ever was. I'm working with Beck one day and Bret Michaels the next.
Hilarious.
And I just, I tip my hat to him every chance I get. I mean, there's so many amazing things you can say about him and that band. And all those guys were amazing to us. I mean, we'd doodle on the console, which is a classic old school thing that's kind of lost now. There's not so many consoles. But the mixing console, all the faders
tape
have a little spot above them to write a note of what on that song is on that channel, So we would, and you'd be working so long on a project that, you'd start doodling and, decorating and making little exploding, like cartoon looking wham things around, where it says bass guitar or whatever. You just do doodling. Yeah. Sometimes you'd start doodling all over the place and add tape. And Ricky Rocket, the drummer in Poison, noticed Rob and I doing this. And he's an amazing artist himself, and probably nobody knows, but he's a doodler himself and makes all kinds of rad shit. He's a totally rad guy, and so he sees us doing this, and one day shows up at the studio with the most expensive, like, keeps flipping out, folding and folding and folding thing of art pencils and art pens that he picked up, and he'd gone out and brought it down to the studio and go, hey guys, I thought you could use a little more. Because we were just using the Sharpies, like 3 colors of Sharpies.
Get a little more intricate on your art.
Yeah, black, red, and blue is getting boring to him, so he brought over like 100 pens.
Hilarious, man. That is so funny. That's some rock star shit. Like, you should be working, but hey, why don't you doodle while you work on our records?
He's paying the bill.
Yeah.
And he sends over 100 multicolored pens so we can make better art.
Yeah. So fucking hilarious, man.
As his meter's running. I mean, yeah, so that kind of stuff, I mean, you can't, it's just like yeah.
It's great to be around artists, right? No matter what kind of people it is, I mean, look, you work with Moby, Gwen Stefani, Motörhead, Beck. I mean, your career has been incredible, A
lot of people get pigeonholed in production. You're that guy. You're the hip hop guy. You're the R&B guy. You're the rock guy. You're the pop punk guy, and you're the mixer or whatever. You get pigeonholed in one way or another, and because I did like. In my childhood, I had eclectic stuff flowing across my radar, and when I started recording with Rob, we worked together for about 10 years. We both shared an interest in the song, and so it wasn't the act or what was hot now or this or that. It was like, do they have an interesting song? So that's why Beck to Elliott Smith to Wool to everybody had an interesting song and an interesting thing to say, and so we were interested in helping them communicate that. We knew from the street level, we knew we could help them communicate it better than they would on their own. Be able to on their own. We could help empower them and empower that message, and that really, that's why the eclectic career. I mean, the chance to work with Motörhead. If you could, I mean,
which record did you work on?
I didn't work on a record. I worked on we did one song. A friend of mine created the cartoon SpongeBob SquarePants.
Oh yeah,
and all animators are huge music fans. As you know,
SpongeBob. And, so you're billionaire, buddy. Yeah. Holy shit! Right,
Steve Hillenburg, and he was my neighbor as the band title goes. But literally, he was my neighbor 3 doors down, in our first place in the Hollywood Hills.
Wow.
And Steve Hampt, who the weaving, as we were saying at the beginning of this conversation, Steve Hampt, who was a CalArts student, as was Steve Hillenburg. Steve Hampt was a filmmaker out of CalArts. Beck loved him. He'd made an indie film on his credit card, which was the impetus for the song Loser. It was Steve's film, Kill the Moonlight. We sampled pieces of Kill the Moonlight in the song Loser. I'm a driver, I'm a winner, things are going to change, I can feel it, out of Steve's movie. So then Steve gives me a proposal, $600 to make the Loser video on film.
Wow.
And so it was all, we probably didn't have $600 then, but we did it. And then we did the road trip to Humboldt and back. I rented a car. I paid for that $150 for the rent a car. So maybe the budget was really about $750. So we make the Loser video. And then years later, I'm living on this little street in the Hollywood Hills called Lindo. And I meet this guy 3 doors down. And he says, oh, yeah, I think we have a mutual friend, Steve Hampt. He says, and when I moved in, he said, I think my buddy Tom lives right by you.
Yeah.
And so we met and became friends. Anyway, one day Steve called up and we talked about music and we knew each other's tastes. and he's making the feature, a SpongeBob movie, and he calls up and he says, Tom, and I'd already put in a pitch to do something on it, and I don't remember what. Oh, and yeah, at that point I actually had a house with a pool, and we were swimming in the pool, and one day, and Steve says, hey, I'm going to do a bar scene fight in the film, and I want to have Motörhead be playing out of the jukebox for the bar fight. And I was like, yes. And Steve also saw it as he used the film as a platform to champion artists that he liked. So
that's great.
You'd have like an like a hot indie artist at the time, with the SpongeBob movie in there because he loved them and wanted to champion them. And then Motörhead, he always felt like they were unsung, like they were, he understood the power and influence of that band. Like the Velvet Underground or something. He understood the significance of Motörhead, and he wanted to help champion that. And so he said, will you make the bar scene fight song? I was like, yeah. And he knew it was like the absolute, apex dream for me. So I went to, it's a film, so I got flown first class to Frankfurt with the music supervisor, Karen Rackman, Ricky Rackman's sister. And we get flown, and we land in Frankfurt, and Motörhead's doing the summer festival season starting tomorrow. They've just landed from LA as well. And I was noticed you never had anybody from Motörhead on. Hang on a second. Well,
I had. I mean, I tried to have Mickey on.
I was going to say, Phil or Mickey. I mean, those guys are amazing. I mean, obviously the guys in Motörhead always in the shadow of Lemmy.
Yeah.
But those guys. Anyway, so I get flown to Frankfurt, and I land. And fortunately, their manager had arranged the studio in Frankfurt, because this studio, private, owned by these two wonderful guys. With their own label, making their own records for their own label in their own studio in their own little biosphere, they were not at all prepared for the loudest band in the world.
Wow!
And the studio just crumbled and collapsed. Distortion. I mean, it couldn't handle it. And they had, and there I am as the producer, and all they were like was like, this is a song we're going to knock out for a big payday for this film, so that we can then the rest of the day rehearse our material for the new material for the record that just came out that we haven't practiced for the festival we're playing tomorrow.
Oh my God!
And so tensions ran high, and Lemmy had been on a multi-day bender in L.A. and hadn't slept for days, and had arrived in Frankfurt, and he was in a really sour mood. So, it's the classic "Don't Meet Your Heroes." I had a chance to record John Fogerty for a compilation record once when I was with Richard Thompson, and Fogerty showed up in the studio and he needed help. I left; I couldn't risk it. So, but I took a chance on Motörhead, and so there I am in Frankfurt, and it was clearly. I got done, and about 1:32 a.m., I'm rolling back in the car with Karen to the hotel, and Steve's on the phone from L.A. Hey, Tom, how was it? I was like, Steve, was the worst day of recording in my entire life.
Wow.
And all I can say is, we got it in the can. I can't believe it, but we've got it in the can. I'm going to take it back home and sort it out at my place. And but it was unbelievable. And not that and everybody, it was no one's fault. And again, nobody was pointing the bad vibe gun at anyone. Yeah. But it was us.
That's the gamble when you got like a one-off one day, Like,
trust me, I've had some tough days in the studio. Nothing compares. So I get back there, and Steve's like, and I shape it up, and I send it to Steve. It's always, I'm a producer. I produce results. I'm going to make this happen. Force of will. And so I deliver it to Steve, and he'd asked Lemmy to rewrite because it's for a kid's film.
Yeah.
He'd taken a song, it was like a George Thorogood style blues song called "You Better Run." It's like "You better run before I kill you" kind of blues song.
Yeah.
And so perfect for a barroom site. And he'd asked, there was something about, I don't know, a knife and a chain or something and killing you. And Steve had said, hey, Lemmy, can you just rewrite these particular lyrics because it's for a kid's film?
Yeah.
And so he did. And Lemmy, of course, took it a notch further and just retitled and reworked the song and called it "You Better Swim."
You better swim. Oh, I heard. You better swim.
For an undersea bar fight. Oh, and so we got those new lyrics, and Lemmy delivered. The new lyrics were there. We recorded it that night in Frankfurt. It was an amazing moment where, you set up the vocals in a studio. You'll usually put up some of those false walls. They call them gobos or baffles. Put up some of those like movable walls. And they'll make like a triangle of them, and they put a vocal mic in the middle, and it faces the control room. This is classic. Like, we've all seen this image of recording. Yeah. And the people are standing out there around the mic, or one person singing. They got one ear off the headphones, and this little false wall behind them on a microphone. It's how you do a vocal in a big room. So we set that up, and and Lemmy has to wait, and I'm testing the mic because he's so like a bluesman, like Earl Burnside. He is just on it. His whole thing is to pride himself in being able to deliver.
Yeah.
Like, here's a song, we know the music of it, we've rewritten it, we've rearranged it, but we know how to do this. He's on the band, he's on himself, he's just driven to do it. So he doesn't want to wait. He wants to rock and roll.
Yeah.
Like, boom, let's do this. And we go to do the vocal, and the mic, we put him up there, and the mic starts distorting and falling apart, and he just doesn't even say anything. He just walks, throws his headphones down, walks away, sits at the upright piano in the room, just pushing the keys. So I go out there and start talking to the studio owners and working up the mic and trying to keep the whole thing alive. And then it gets time to do the vocal, and we're sitting in there. Okay, let's do it. And I'm looking through the glass, and suddenly I see those little portable walls start moving. I'm like, what is going on? And all the walls change, and he resets the whole thing in the same position, except he's put the walls to the glass and turned the microphone around the other way. And so he's made the wall behind him that we normally would look at, and he's put his back to us and the entire wall to us.
Yeah.
And so we're just looking at this wall.
He's just like, fuck you guys.
Yeah.
Hilarious.
And the mic's up like it is, upside down, and
Yeah.
off he goes. In like one take. He does another one for, I asked him for one more.
Yeah,
Just for spare
safety,
parts. Yeah. And that's it. And I put it back, and I assemble it in LA, and I send it to Steve, and I'm just so happy that this even exists. And
That's badass.
and he drops it in the film, and he's like, Tom, I love it.
Yeah.
I love it. Wow, this is great. Motörhead's going to be in the SpongeBob film. Wow. Hey, those new lyrics are so bitchin'. What if we ask him to write the second verse too?
Oh.
And I'm like,
Not gonna happen. You gotta just cut it out. You just gotta chop it out. Yeah. No one. First of all, just repeat it.
it doesn't need to happen.
Yeah.
The part that we needed to remove to make it child friendly has been done. It's like,
Oh my God! Pushing it.
and I'm like, he's like, I got to call into the manager. I was like,
Oh my God! Can you imagine?
the manager,
Rob Smalls or whatever.
the manager comes back and says, yeah, let me be happy to. And I said, okay. And they'd booked a bunch of time at my favorite place, once again, Sunset Sound. And I said, Steve, well, you guys have got other things musically for the film going on down at Sunset Sound.
Yeah.
It was my worst day of recording. I don't really want to have Lemmy come over to my house and do this touch-up, but I'll go do it on neutral territory because I don't want to... The studio in Germany it was the worst day of recording because the studio in Germany wasn't prepared. And so I don't want him to come to a home studio thinking that, with the guy, he associates me with the studio in Germany. I don't want him to come to a home non-traditional studio.
Yeah.
Because my studio was meant to look like your living room. And so I want to go to a formal studio since,
So it looks pro still.
And just knock it out. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's just, and even though the one in Germany looked pro. So if you're down at Sunset and you can arrange it, of course, I'll do whatever needs to be done for the project. So yeah, of course. They've said yes, that's great. And it doesn't work out. The Sunset's all, all their time's chewed up there. And so I just roll the dice once again and I say, don't meet your heroes. And so I say, sure. All right, we'll do it at the house.
Yeah.
And I actually talked to his manager, and his manager said, hey, Tom, I heard it went rough in Germany. I'm just telling you, I've talked to Lemmy. It's going to be okay that he comes to your house. And so I'm not an asshole. I used to be when I was younger. Oh, sure, of course, come over. It was, I shit you not, the yin and the yang. It was for a multitude of reasons, the best day of recording of my life.
Wow.
And so it went complete full circle a couple months apart. That day, when you're a producer, you learn quickly that if you don't have a drummer, you don't have a song.
Yep.
And if you don't have a snare sound, you don't have a hit. You just can't. It's not going to reach people. That's if you're making live music, it has to have that. That it has to be driven. You got to have your Charlie Watts. So you always have a list of people you like to work with. So when back in those 90s, that era when Smashing Pumpkins came out with Gish, I was like, this drummer is off the charts.
Oh yeah, Jimmy.
So fast forward to 2003 or 4, whenever that is, and I'm helping 2004, and I'm helping Jimmy Chamberlain with his solo record, Jimmy Chamberlain Complex, and I'm mixing it. I helped him from the beginning. I helped him set up in the studio to track. But again, meeting your heroes, I was very careful about getting too involved. But over time, we kind of became friends, and then I said, okay, I'll mix it. And so it's the last day of mixing, the last touch-ups, and Jimmy comes by, and he says, hey, what's going on today? Oh, we got an overdub later. I got to be done by 4. And he's like, who you overdubbing? And the mic's all jacked upside down. And I was like, well, Lemmy's like, yeah, I could tell. I knew it. Oh, how cool.
Yeah.
So here I am with my drumming hero, now friend, Jimmy Chamberlain, touching up his record. Lemmy comes over. I don't know what's going to happen. We have the best session ever. He rewrites the lyrics on the fly on my bar in there. First he starts talking and just like going around the studio, and he was clearly making me feel comfortable. He was going out of his way to like check all the instruments, check out all my guitars, check out all my amps, tell stories about it, whatever. I was like, oh, he's putting me at ease. Oh, that's really gracious and unexpected and amazing. So, okay, thank you very much. And we sit down at the bar, and he says, oh, we got to do these lyrics. He just writes out just like this paragraph of, of simple genius.
Yeah.
On the straight out of his head. Boom. How's that look? Looks good to me. He goes in, sings it in one take. I ask him for 2 more to cover it. So the whole process takes about 12 minutes.
Wow.
And we're done. From settling in the studio, making me feel comfortable in my own studio, bless him, instead of the other way around. And then he goes, sitting down at the bar, singing to back, 12 minutes instead of this long drawn out thing. I mean, we were well prepared. My engineer, Mike Tarantino, was there. Boom. We got it down. And he says, hey, do you have anything to drink? And knowing Lemmy was coming over, of course, I had a half-gallon of Jack in the fridge.
Yeah.
But I didn't want to make it look like I, knew that was his drink. So I put like a Johnny Walker next to it and something else, and some tequila or something. I was like, hey, what do you want? He's like, oh, I'll have the Jack Daniels. Okay. So I make him a Jack and Coke with a proper like Mexican sugar Coke. And he sees this book, The History of Rock and Roll, Images by Rolling Stone, this coffee table book someone given me. And he's like, oh, Rolling Stone, History of Rock. Let's see what they have to say about that. He's like, phew. And he opens the first page, and boom, he says something about the first page. And then he doesn't flip through it. He reaches like an encyclopedia. He turns to the next page, like a dictionary. Poof. And he had something to say about that picture. And suddenly I realized we're doing the whole book.
Wow.
And it gets to that really famous picture of Sid and Nancy in front of a wall.
Oh, yeah.
And he's like, I'm right about here. They cropped me out.
Wow. Oh, man. Hilarious.
Every picture, he's got something to say. And sometimes it's an anecdote. He recognizes nearly everyone. Oh, and then we get to a page that he doesn't recognize. And I know who it is because when I got to that page, looking through the book, I'd had to go to the cheat sheet and look it up too.
Yeah.
And so I'm starting to tell him, like, yeah, I got stuck on that one too, Lemmy. And as I'm saying that, as I'm starting to say, it's the mother's of invention. He says, oh, it's the mother's invention. And he looks and he says, in fact, he knows the guy's name. I don't remember the guy's name. I think it was Eddie. He says, and it might have been of Flo and Eddie from the Turtles. But he goes, that's Eddie Motörhead so-and-so, the guy I stole the name from.
Whoa.
It's like, who
no
knew?
shit.
Yeah.
That's crazy, man. Yeah, Lemmy, man. I mean, God, that guy. I just can't believe. I wish he had books, I wish he wrote books.
We're like a quarter of the way through the book, and his PA, who's been in the whole time, is just like biting his nails on the phone, stepping outside the back door on the phone. And Lemmy says, yeah, I know. We're supposed to go to Capitol and to the studio and do those voiceovers. You're listening to Y100 or whatever. I'm Lemmy. He's like, and finally it's getting later and later, and he's like, just message him and tell him I'm not coming. And the guy's like, okay. And he's like, oh, I'm really enjoying it here. I'm just going to stay here.
Wow.
But I've gotten a third thing to do that day too, besides Jimmy Chamberlain and the Motörhead touch-up. And then, and it's tagging on. It's about time for me to leave. I'm watching the clock. The sun's going down. And he says as he finishes the book, he says to the guy, I'm about ready. I'd like to go to the Rainbow now. Can you take me down there?
Wow.
And the guy says, yeah, sure. And he's like, yeah, I got to go. And so we walk out the front door of the house, through the living room, and say goodbye to Lemmy, and and hug each other. He leaves, and I can't believe it. And I'm like, and I run back in. I'm like, okay, we got to go. It's the Collateral rap party. And I went and saw the music I'd made for Collateral on the big screen, in the movie in its entirety for the first time ever. The best day in music.
What a great day, right?
Yeah, forget about it.
Oh my God. Yeah. Well, fuck, man. Thanks for coming and doing the show. Unbelievable. You came out from Vegas. You got Bong Load is out there. Now you brought some records. What do you got? Oh.
So check it out.
Yeah. Oh, man. Elliott Smith Figure 8. Wow. Look at this fucking record, dude.
So we did
numbered, man. Only 2016 made?
That's it, yeah.
God, this is so good.
I suddenly realized in the end of 2015 that 2016 was going to be from 2000 and or rather from 1991, from the inception in my apartment to the then releases in '92 of Bong Load. That we were gonna. It's the 25th year since we started making music.
25 years.
Yeah, so we went and we pressed a couple things, and I've been looking at the vinyl revival for a while from the sidelines, and I was thinking, no, and suddenly it hit me like, you know what? Even if this is the only thing we do, let's just pay homage to the artists in the 25 years. I don't know if anybody even remember it. We did this.
Amazing.
People went bonkers.
Dude, this is amazing right here.
So
Figure 8.
it's
what else you got?
So we did the 2 Elliott records that we'd put out on Bong Load.
Wow.
Vinyl-wise.
Wow, man.
Of course, these are they're DreamWorks records. We made them for DreamWorks, but
right.
we put the vinyl out originally on both of those.
Unbelievable.
And then
Mellow Gold.
we had to do that.
Unbelievable. Look at that old fucking photo. Odelay. Wow.
And then all these, so they're extra heavyweight covers.
Yeah. I saw
like
that.
our originals, we would spend the extra money when we never had it. We never made any money off the vinyl, but we did, like, these are UV coated. And so when you see our stuff on eBay now from 20, 25 years ago,
it's not all faded or anything?
It all looks killer because,
God damn.
Yeah, always, go in for timeless and go in for, so this is a sort of faithless reproduction of our 90s pressing of this record. And so it has the trifold photo. And this is Beck's grandfather's artwork.
That's incredible. It comes with that shit. Look at that. Yeah. It's so funny. Like Beck's grandfather's artwork looks like, it's almost like like he knew it was going to go on his grandson's record label. Yeah, it's just incredible, Wow, blue vinyl.
They're all one-off colors, and they're.
Whoa! Look at this thing, man. Are these available still, or are they all sold out?
There's, we metered it. Because they were going to sell out in the first day.
Yeah.
And we just blipped them on, so the last little blips of these 4 are still available.
God, these are.
But it's down to like 30 on Odelay. I mean, it's like it's pretty much done, and they'll never be pressed again like this.
Odelay, look at this, man. Look at this devil's haircut. I mean, come on. I got a devil's hair. Hot wax. Lord only knows. Oh, the new pollution. This record is a masterpiece.
The Lawrence Welk
Novocaine, Jackass. Where It's At was one of the greatest videos ever, man. I got 2 turntables and a microphone. Oh, my God. Mine a sissy neck, ready man. Oh, high five, rocking the Catskill. God, Ramshackle. This is a great.
Ramshackle recorded in the barn in Humboldt where we did Either Or as well with Elliott Smith.
Oh my God, this is awesome, dude. I can't fucking thank you enough. Unbelievable.
And
and then the chorus, the whole reason this conversation happened, Masters of Reality, man. Look at this. Oh,
and that's what I had in my bag. And as I was walking out in Las Vegas this morning, I went to the rack and grabbed this as well. This Dark Arts album. It's the sophomore second record from the bass player in the Killers, Mark. And
wow,
yeah, this is the one where I was like, I got to turn you on to this because he made this record, and we said, you know what? And we're working with the Killers on another project, a vinyl reissue, a 10-year anniversary of Sam's Town, their sophomore record. So, and Mark had just been finishing this solo record, and we said, you know what? Let us do a first run on Bong Load of vinyl, and just like we did back in the day with Beck and Elliott Smith, like, let us drop this on vinyl. Let's just do a tiny amount. And he said, yeah, he wanted to do like 200 or something. I was like, well, we got to kind of do 500 to crank up the prices, but let's do 500 of these. And anyway, it's one of those moments. So I'm working on this 25th reissue thing, and I get sent Mark's record. He sends it over for us to listen to, just as a friend, and I can't believe it. And I hear the first song, and I'm like, this is why I started a label in the first place.
Wow.
I knew in the first 15 seconds that I was going to want to put this record out. And so anyway, it's a proper album experience. It will
that's sick.
It's got that, it's a classic in that sense that in the first listen a couple things will grab you, and then the layers will unfold as you listen to it.
That's
more.
amazing, man. I can't thank you enough for doing the show. I think we should do a comedy record together. What do you think? You've never done a stand-up record, right?
I think you're right.
You want to do one?
Let's do it.
I think it'd be incredible.
I would love to bring back the
comedy
long-form comedy LP.
Let's do one.
Yeah.
All right, we're in, man. It'll be insane. I can't think of a better label to do one for, because over the years, you know what I mean? Because I'm like, oh my God, Beck and just Elliott Smith and all that stuff, and to be on Bong Load would be amazing. A vinyl record that sounds incredible too. All right, man. Let's see. Bong Load got a website, right?
Yeah. Bongload.com, bongloadrecords.com. Easy to find.
One last thing. Did you eat yet? Oh, let's go eat. Eat, or you got to go somewhere?
I have not eaten.
All right, let's eat after this. But one last thing. What made you go to Vegas?
I've got a place in England, and I've always gone back and forth my whole life between the States and England. And although I was centered in LA for 25 years, and I wanted to do something different for the next phase. And so I unplugged from my place in the hills and went to the UK and set up shop there. And then I needed a place back in the States, and I wanted to do this anniversary thing. I was going to do it with an old distributor and friend in the UK. But I realized I can't press these records in pounds and try to sell them in America. They're going to need to come out in America. So
yeah.
I quickly realized when investigating the Bong Load 25th anniversary in 2015 that I was going to have to do it in the States, and it was really making me not want to do it. And I dropped in November, at the very end of the year. It was like we were going to have to do it for 2016 or not. It was like the get off the pot moment, now or never. November, I was in Las Vegas, and I ran into an old friend, Michael Stratton, and he said, "I know you're thinking about doing the vinyl thing." And there were so many unanswered questions about it. I've been having a bunch of conversations with a guitar player, dear friend that I work with a lot, Matt Chait, and he was saying, "Come do it, and I'll help you out with it." And I was like, "Yeah," but I'd given him this huge list of reasons why I couldn't. And I ran into Michael Stratton, and he said, "You know what? Everything you need support-wise is here in Las Vegas. There's this huge resurgence or renaissance, or really kind of coming out of downtown. The art scene in Las Vegas is deeper and better than anyone would ever imagine who doesn't live there." And suddenly, with this sort of explosion in downtown, there's an amazing record store, 11th Street Records, has a studio in the back, which is like a classic, like Producer's Workshop Hollywood studio, like a 50s, 60s classic Hollywood studio. So suddenly, I found an artist loft there that I could operate out of for a place in the States, and I needed a place in the States anyway. So I found an artist loft I could operate out of. Then I found a record store that would do our fulfillment, and that had a studio I could work in the back of it. And the Killers have been in there this year, and Rooney's in there right now this week.
Rooney?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And so all of a sudden, and suddenly there was, a social media team that was offering their services, and everything that was making it a problem. The celebration of Bong Load's 25th anniversary and refiring up the presses, everything that was a problem was suddenly, all these problems were being erased, and Las Vegas was clearly the answer. And it's been amazing. I've been there 12 months now, and it's just been great. What
a great time right now because of the resurgence of vinyl,
Yeah.
And you have a gold mine library of like incredible music, man, that needs to be heard on vinyl,
And what came clear, and a bit from talking from Simon, our distributor, Bong Load, he worked with Bong Load in the 90s in the UK. He's got a company now called Forte. Talking with him, and he was really pointing out how and why the limited editions, why I settled on the limited editions is, it is affordable art. I was like, if I make every pressing closed ended, like it's never going to be out in this exact configuration with this color ever again. And if we hand stamp those with a foil number, it's like a lithograph. It's real tangible art.
Totally.
I mean, that version, you could probably buy a vanilla version of Odelay on vinyl as everything is getting repressed. You could probably buy one for $20, $25. This one retails for $35. But there's 2016 copies celebrating the 25th year of the label. And then that's it.
Blue marble vinyl, original artwork, poster inside, original fucking where the source, ground zero back in the day of Beck.
Yeah. So everything we're doing is that on vinyl is that limited edition. It's quickly leading into artist development. We'll see what happens with that. We're working on some ideas, and we're working on. It's beautiful. We're working right now on interfacing with the major labels again, and they've never needed artist development more than they need now.
That's cool. That's cool. Well, looking forward. We'll do a comedy record.
Yes.
Let's go get some food, man.
Totally
Thanks for
down.
doing the show.
Woo.
All right, thanks for everybody for tuning in. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a review on iTunes. Candles lit.